So good afternoon, and the time is now 1:08, and a quorum of the board is present. The State Board of Ed meeting of January 14th is called to order. I think maybe if you don't mind, just before public participation, if we could intro new employees for a moment, and please feel free to stay for the meeting, but I know there may be some time options. So Vanessa, I think it's for me to turn over to you.
Good afternoon. I wanted to introduce Lynn Pansari and Ashley Kemmer, both from Office of Special Education. Emily and Lynn, is Ashley in the back? Okay. So can you guys please introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about what you do here, and a little bit about yourself. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Lynn Pansari. I'm with the Michigan Department of Education Low Incidence Outreach. I'm an education consultant for visually impaired students, their families, and local school districts, as well as their teachers throughout the state of Michigan.
Welcome, Lynn. Thank you. And Ashley, please come on up closer so we can.
I'm Ashley Kemmer, and I work for the Department of Special Education, and our main focus right now that I'm working on is the APR, which is the Annual Performance Review, that we turn into the federal government.
Welcome, welcome, Ashley. Okay, and Mertz covers for me so often, so one reason we did that was so that I could cover for her, so that now under public participation, the boss over here is going to start working that item. And thanks for taking the time to be with us today, and we're looking forward to hearing your comments. I see some familiar faces that are just finally connecting here after a while. 12 years, maybe.
Public
Yes, ma'am.
participation?
Yes, ma'am.
Do I have all the forms for public participation? If not, if you'd pass those up, I would greatly appreciate it. Our first speaker is going to be Lorna Holmes, and as she's approaching the table, I will let you know that 5 minutes are allowed for public participation. We've got a timer up here. If you have handouts, if you bring them with you to the table, you can just pass them to one of the gentlemen at the end, and they'll be happy to distribute it. You can have a seat right there at the end of the table.
I'm going to sit. I don't have a handout. This is.
That's
fine.
that's totally fine. And we just want to also remind speakers that the board does not engage in a conversation as a matter of practice. So, thank you.
All right. I'm Lorna Holmes. I'm a registered voter at 100 Westwood Street in Hillsdale. And I'm an unofficial representative of Climate Parents, which is an organization of citizens concerned to see that Michigan's school children receive the best scientific education we can give them, including recent advances in climate science. And I'm here with a petition thanking the Michigan State Board of Education for taking action on climate science, specifically for considering the next generation science standards. And it's signed by 1,014 people all across and up and down Michigan. And before I hand it over, I'd just like to share 5 comments that people made on the petition, ranging from brief to very brief, and then hopefully I have a minute for a brief comment of my own. The first one is from William Neal of Allendale. I express my thanks to Mr. Austin and the Michigan State Board of Education and support their decision to move forward with world-class science education standards for Michigan students. As a geologist, I am concerned that the politicizing of science topics such as global climate change targets an uneducated populace with respect to what science is and science content that should be part of everyone's K-12 education. As a grandfather and great-grandfather of children being educated in our state, I hope that our state science standards will be thorough and efficient for their education. I hope you will follow the next generation science standards that have been developed by a national group of experts with greater input than we could ever provide from an individual state's limited expertise. Even casual attention to the daily news demonstrates that our populace needs to know about natural resources, energy, natural hazards, global climate, etc., and their impacts on our environment, economy, and future way of life. The next one is from Ted Reynolds of Ann Arbor. Thank you for approaching this question in a meaningful manner. Students may not be able to work out all the answers for themselves, but they should learn enough about scientific method to recognize the difference between serious science and political and ideological scarecrows. The next one is from Chris Riley of Manistee. Thank you for helping improve science standards for our children's education. Preparing our coming generations for challenges with climate change and clean renewable energy sources is critical to all our futures, Michigan, our nation, and the world. Fourth one from James Stevens of Hillsdale. Thanks, whoops, that's not it. I've been an educator for 40 years, and I've spent a good deal of that time trying to overcome my students' ignorance of science. He is a college educator. Thanks to you, sir, and thanks to your colleagues on the board for doing the right thing for the right reasons. Like many, many others, I'm grateful. And the last one is from Elizabeth Shelton of Wayne. Thanks so much. The children of today are going to be the adults in the future that will affect us all. In order for them to make good decisions, they need to learn facts. And because of you, they will. All right. There are many other comments. As I said, there are 1,014 signatures, so I'll give that to the chairman. My own brief comment is this. Time is really of the essence here. We're not discussing whether or not to teach science in school, although most of the opposition essentially brings the question down to that level. We're merely discussing whether our science instruction will meet up-to-date standards, and that seems to be a fairly straightforward decision. In fact, this is an update of something we already do. It's quite similar to the adoption of the revised school improvement framework, which had, I saw, a 1-month public comment period in order to facilitate implementing it in the 2014 to 15 school year. I suggest that you adopt a similar time frame for discussion of the NGSS. Science advances rapidly, and if we delay, the standards will no longer be up to date by the time they are implemented, which would be a great disservice to our children. Thank you. And who should I give this petition? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Janice Party, and she will be followed by Yanni Bryant Kiphoff.
I'll kill you with paper.
No kidding. It's heavy.
Whenever you're ready, we're ready, and you can be seated or stand as you choose.
Well, I taught for 40 years, so I'll stand. My name is Janice Party. I am a retired educator from Whitmore Lake Public Schools, just north of Ann Arbor. I'm a national board certified teacher. I'm also an employee of the Michigan Education Association, working to mentor teachers seeking national board certification. And I know this board knows about national board certification because it was part of your priorities and goals. So for me, national board certification was a very meaningful event in my life. It made me examine my practice against high and rigorous standards, and it forever changed my teaching practice. I thought I was a good teacher. I was a good teacher. I was not a great teacher. And completing national board certification helped me see pathways to make myself a great teacher. What I'm here asking the board for today is more advocacy for funding for national board certification. We used to have some federal money. It is gone. We used to have state money that matched the federal money. That was taken out of the budget probably 10 years ago. They are revamping the cost structure for national board certification, so it will cost less. But I'd like to see the board encourage the legislature to put some money behind it so that more teachers can seek national board certification. And for me, the mentoring opportunities have been tremendous. I have helped teachers all across the state in face-to-face meetings and through e-work to achieve national board certification. Unfortunately, of the 106,000 national board certified teachers in the country, less than 0.4% of them are from Michigan. And I think that's sad. And one of the biggest determining factors is money incentives for teachers to do it. And then I'm putting on another hat. I work with the Washington Area School District for the Michigan Center for Accomplished Teaching. And in that role, we are working to spread the word about National Board Certification in Michigan. And we are facilitating a contract through the Michigan Department of Education State School Reform and Redesign Office. We have a grant of over $300,000 to work with priority schools. Our target teachers are pre-K through third grade teachers in reading and literacy. And in that grant, we have built in training for teachers to do National Board Certification. We call it Jumpstart. We have built in mentors for those teachers, so they have one-to-one help when they need it. So it is a 1-to-5 ratio of mentors, one mentor for 5 teachers. The biggest group of our teachers are Detroit Public School teachers because that's where most of the priority schools are. But we do have teachers from Battle Creek, Pontiac, and Lansing. We almost had teachers from Jackson, but the rollout has stumbled along just because it's new and people didn't hear about it. So our goal is to do more with recruitment and spreading the word as the year goes on. We are also training a cadre of National Board Certified teachers to become mentors. Just following our network conference in December, we held a workshop and trained 6 more to become candidate support providers. And there's a skill in that. You just can't suddenly mentor someone in something that they did themselves but don't know how to pass it on. So we teach the mentoring skills, and we are recruiting more and more teachers. We have also cadres of teachers in Macomb County at Armada High School, where the principal of the year, the high school principal of the year, Phil Jankowski? Yeah. Where Phil has gathered a group of 7 of his teachers. They have some funding from local organizations to help with their fees, and they are going to begin the national board process in the coming school year. We have a national board teacher in Novi who is a principal at one of the elementary schools, and he has a group of teachers that they'll be working with in the coming year to achieve national board certification. It's small, it's fledgling, but what we need is some money behind it, because all the states that have thousands or 10,000s of national board certified teachers offer some sort of stipend or incentive for teachers to do it. So I'd encourage the board to take a position that we put some money behind it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, good timing. You were a teacher.
Our next speaker is Yanni Bryant Kuphoff, followed by Nancy Carey.
Good afternoon. My name is Yone Bryant Kuphoff. I have taught for over 20 years in Kalamazoo Public Schools. I am the middle school director for Michigan Science Teachers Association, and I serve on the science leadership team in our district. I've also served as a writer for the K-7 grade level content expectations companion documents, and I'm also on the review team for Next Generation Science Standards. Currently, my students are working on science and engineering practices. I want to offer a picture of what the science practices of Next Generation Science Standards look like compared to the current grade level content expectations in a middle school classroom. The current high school expectation for 8th graders in chemistry is to name and write the formula of simple binary compounds. In middle school classrooms, students need to be able to recognize and write the formula for common compounds, water, sugar, salt, etc. They do this by identifying the elements that compose these simple compounds from the periodic table, including the location, mass, and charge of these elements. This can be accomplished by simply copying the information presented in a lecture form or on worksheet practice. Only the memorization of these formulas is required. Now, in Next Generation Science Standards, students are required to develop models, to describe the atomic structure of these simple molecules and extended structures. So now, students not only need to identify the location, mass, and charge of these elements, but they now must be able to apply that information to construct a model of those compounds. Now my students are color coding the groups of the periodic table. They're identifying the charges and basic characteristics of each group and constructing models of the compounds with charges to understand the bonding process. This illustrates the science and engineering practice that students are able to gather, read, synthesize information from multiple appropriate sources and assess their credibility, accuracy, and biases. These students are now not only able to write the formulas for these simple compounds, but they're also able to understand and explain to their peers how and why these compounds form based on their properties and charges. By going through this process, the students are taking part in their own learning on a deeper, more engaged, and sophisticated manner. They're risking sharing their thinking with each other. Changing the current standards will take time and effort, but learning science through implementing the science practices of next generation science standards will help the students of Michigan be in a better position to compete and contribute to our global economy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Nancy Carey, followed by Joseph Krajcik.
Good afternoon. My name is Nancy Carr, and I am the Outreach Science Consultant for the Battle Creek Area Mathematics and Science Center. And I've been in this position for over 15 years now, and in that position I have had a great opportunity to work. My life has been steeped in science curriculum, I guess you can say. I was a writer for the grade level content expectations for science. I was co-chair of the companion document for the grade level content expectations. And I also serve on the lead, as a lead team member for the Next Generation Science Standards for the state of Michigan. And and I also want to tell you a little bit about the Battle Creek Area Math and Science Center and how we reach through all areas of the state of Michigan. We have a unique program which is what we call Serial City Science. And Serial City Science is a kindergarten through middle school science unit program. And it has been adopted by over 200 districts across the state of Michigan. We're in the UP, we're in the Thumb, we're in the southwest corner, we're in the we're all the way down and almost in Toledo and Temperance, and across the state of Michigan, children and teachers, over thousands of teachers and hundreds of thousands of children are enjoying science through inquiry through our program. And we have been doing this for over 20 years. But what is unique in my position, or exciting, I guess should say, in my position, since April, last April, my phone at least 3 or 4 times a day has a teacher or an administrator from across Michigan that is inquiring about our program. And the number one question is, when are you going to align to the Next Generation Science Standards? What do you already have for the Next Generation Science Standards? Teachers, administrators, curriculum directors all are requesting already Next Generation material. And so I have to ask myself, why? You know, why is there this push? And so I've been starting to collect some ideas. And first of all, they're looking toward the future. Administrators especially are telling me that, this is our science year. We want to adopt a program that's aligned with the Next Generation Science Standards because we see that as our future. We don't want to adopt something that's going to be gone in the next couple of years. And they also, teachers especially, are excited about the practices, the 8 practices that are incorporated into the Next Generation Science Standards. And they'll ask me, so where can I do engineering in this kindergarten in motion kit? Or where can I do it in engineering with My Earth? So our teachers are asking the questions, they're eager for some answers, and they're eager for some materials. And I want to tell you about one little kindergarten teacher that just called me. If they teach kindergarten, they're little kindergarten teachers. I don't know why that is, but she just called me last Friday, and she was so excited because in the NGSS, weather it currently is in first grade, and it moves to the kindergarten, so she gets to teach weather. And she called me and she was telling me all that she's done to adopt this weather unit to her kindergarten, and running her ideas by me, and that she's making this book and the kids are doing this and they're doing the other thing. She was on fire. This is a kindergarten teacher that's told language arts, reading, writing, math, and she was on fire with her science. And so it's that enthusiasm that I hope that we can tap into with the Next Generation Science Standards. And just to end, the Math Science Centers and the Math Science Center Network and MSTA and science leaders across the state, I think, have done a marvelous job of educating our educators in the Next Generation Science Standards. There's an awareness, there's an enthusiasm for this kind of teaching and this kind of learning, and teachers are ready, they're excited, they're ready to learn with their students how to reason their way through science and come up with some solid foundation to get them through their careers. So thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I like how enthusiastic she is.
Our next speaker is Joseph Krajcik.
Superintendent Flanagan, Chairperson Austin, and member of the boards, thank you for listening to me and my colleagues today. I'm Joe Krajcik. I'm a professor of science education and the director of Create for STEM at Michigan State University. I served as the lead writer for the physical science standards for the next generation of science standards, and I also served as the lead writer for the physical science core ideas in the framework for K-12 science education. I'm here today to express why I believe the state of Michigan needs to adopt the next generation of science standards. Our children live in a rapidly changing world where scientific knowledge and technology are evolving quickly. Young people in Michigan will increasingly face stiff competition for jobs from people across the globe, and will need a much stronger foundation in science and engineering to help our state of Michigan and our nation compete in a global economy. Our society has changed to a knowledge-driven one in which we need to equip our children with the conceptual tools to use knowledge to solve problems, innovate, make decisions, and learn and apply new information. Not every child will be interested in or seek a job in science or engineering, but to live a fruitful and productive life, understanding science and engineering is critical. We need citizens in Michigan who can make wise choices no matter what profession they choose to pursue. Citizens of Michigan will need to acquire and apply new information throughout their lives. They will need to evaluate claims and the designs that others put forth based upon their knowledge and the evidence they have. Understanding and using science is not a luxury. It is essential for ensuring that future generations will live in a society that is economically viable, sustainable, and free. The National Research Council crafted the framework for K-12 science education to serve as a foundation for the development of the new education standards. Based on a solid foundation of research evidence, the framework took the stance that all children in our society need to understand disciplinary core ideas blended with science and engineering practices to serve as conceptual tools for using knowledge. You can think of disciplinary core ideas as those ideas that serve as key organizing ideas from a single science discipline that are essential for explaining a host of phenomena or provide the conceptual tools for understanding and investigating new problems and learning more ideas and learning more complex ideas. such ideas like energy, the nature of chemical reactions. You can think of science and engineering practices at the multiple ways of knowing and doing science and engineering, the multiple ways of knowing and doing science and engineering that scientists and engineers use to study the natural world and the design world. Knowledge and use is actually blending these two things together. They're not seen in isolation, they're seen as being used together. The next generation of science standards are based upon the framework for K-12 science education, and as such, are built on a strong foundation of what is known about the teaching and learning of science and what all our students will need to know to be able to live in the 21st century. Grounded in rigorous science, the standards require students to build deep, applied understanding of disciplinary core ideas blended with scientific and engineering practices. Introducing an engineering thread in K-12 science education for the first time, NGSS emphasizes knowledge and use so that the next generation of employees can apply and use knowledge. The next generation of science standards will help Michigan teachers compete in a world that increasingly values deep understanding to produce meaningful products and ensure that Michigan will meet the workforce needs of a new century. With the adoption of NGSS, the state of Michigan has new opportunities. Our science classrooms will change to prepare our children for the world they live in, a knowledge generation and a knowledge application world. The next generation of science standards are ambitious to implement. However, our teaching pool is ready, capable, and willing to move forward. With the adoption of the next generation of science standards, the state of Michigan has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to dramatically affect the teaching and learning of science and engineering in our state. As such, they will help build a 21st century workforce with a vital long-term economic and developmental outcomes. The K-12 science education teachers in our state, as well as those of us in higher education, are ready to move forward and anxiously await the adoption of the next generation of science standards. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Are there any more people who have forms to speak? Thank you.
Thanks for that. Very thoughtful comments. Appreciate it. Perfunctory as it is, approval of State Board of Ed minutes from December 17th. Is there a motion? Moved by Dan, supported by Eileen. Any changes, corrections? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, same. Thank you. We have a real, another exciting opportunity, 2 in one day. Today's on the, who did that?
Sorry.
That's okay, you were busy.
Missing.
Yeah, you were taking care of business, we know. It's a presentation on bridging the middle, collaboration of agencies providing services to middle school students. Very exciting, and I think I'll turn it over, as I did earlier to Lupe, to Michelle, who's arranged for this. We appreciate the opportunity today to maybe make introductions and some comments.
Sure. I'll let them come on up. I have the pleasure of actually not only being at the same institution with Angelique Day and Professor Summers, or both professors, at Wayne State University, but I also serve on the advisory board of the TIP program, which is transition to independence. It's a program for foster care youth, and as a foster parent for 20 years, it was something I was very passionate about, and so are the folks involved in this project. And when anyway, I won't speak too much longer. I could go on and on. They're wonderful people doing wonderful work, and their process is, and doing it in a successful way. So I asked them to come and share what they're doing.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for allowing us. Yeah, it's an absolute honor to be invited to present in front of Superintendent Flanagan and the board members, so thank you for this opportunity. My name is Angelique Day. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Social Work at Wayne State University, and I'm here with my colleague.
Cheryl Summers. I'm educational psychology, school psychology, College of Ed at Wayne State.
And we understand that the State Board of Education has actually taken on the challenge of addressing dropout prevention and recovery, and we applaud the superintendent's efforts to challenge schools across the state with the Dropout Challenge to address these issues. We are here today to talk about a pilot project to increase the education stability and improve the educational outcomes of middle school-aged foster care youth in Wayne County. Foster care youth have unique educational challenges, and we believe that if we can find success with this population of youth, that it can be applicable to other at-risk populations across the state. I'm also talking not just from my professional expertise, but I also happen to be a former foster care youth placed in care in Marquette County here in the state of Michigan. So what I present for you today is both comes from my personal expertise as a professor, as well as my personal experience in the system as a former foster kid. And I had the luxury of having very supportive teachers who were sensitive to the unique needs that I had as a child in foster care. Unfortunately, my experience in the education system, that safe haven that I was provided, is not common among other foster care youth in our state. So this project is really to address that need in a very purposeful way. I have presented some data on this next PowerPoint slide. I also wanted to let you know that there's a fact sheet at the end of your handout that provides you some other statistics. So due to the limited time we have to speak, I wanted you to have the data, but I can't present all of that data to you now. Just some of the major points. 63% of students held back in middle school left without a high school diploma. So this idea of targeting middle school students is really, in our opinion, one of the best ways to address high school dropout rates. We understand from research across the country that successful completion of ninth grade is a predictor of high school graduation. Unfortunately, 50% of foster care youth do not complete high school. So half of all of kids in foster care in our state do not leave with a high school diploma. Specifically, we're targeting Wayne County, and we ran data from the Wayne County Department of Human Services and crossed it with data from the Wayne Regional WISA, and found that 35% of foster care youth ages 10 to 17 in Wayne County are certainly older than their same grade level peers, and that 25% of foster care youth were being identified as being enrolled in a special education program. That's a rate 2 times the youth enrolled in school across Wayne County. Even in Detroit Public Schools, 17% of foster care youth, or of youth in general, are identified as special ed compared to 25% of foster care youth. Okay, so Bridging the Middle, the project we bring before you today, is a concept of, we have multiple agencies, the Department of Education, the Department of Human Services, the Department of Community Health, and the State Court Administrator's Office all have the common mission of improving outcomes for kids in foster care. And we all do good work in our respective agencies, but we're not always aware of the requirements and idiosyncrasies of our other institutions that we depend on to ensure the success of this population. So this particular project is the idea that we all believe that we want these kids to do better, and that we collectively can do better. So this project is the idea of bringing these different systems together in a meaningful way so that we can maximize each of our potentials in our respective agencies to improve outcomes for foster care youth.
And so we have a system where we've got kids in the middle, obviously, and there's Angel. And we've got family child welfare system involved with Angel, the legal system. We've got biological parents, foster and relative caretakers, the school system, and the mental and physical health system. But we have all kinds of process barriers that get in the way. And so a case study demonstrates barriers in this process that foster kids and their caregivers and families regularly experience. So if I may, I'd like to just quickly go through what happens typically. So if we've got a child, Angel we'll call her, she becomes the subject of a CPS investigation, Child Protective Services investigation. A petition is filed removing from parents. This is a simplified version of what often happens. Preliminary hearing is held through our legal and court legal system. The court authorizes the petition. ordering Angel to be placed in care and custody of Michigan Department of Human Services. So then Family and Child Welfare informed the court that it will place Angel with the grandmother. And the parents are ordered to have supervised visitation once a week. Other issues tend not to be addressed. School, medical, psychological, other types of issues tend to be ignored. I'm not speaking from anything that's up there. This is just from something that I have. And if anybody would like these case studies, this case study that we put together with our partners on our larger team, I'd be happy to email them. So then Grandma takes Angel home. There's no written information except a copy of the consent. She knows Angel's been in special education. She doesn't really know anything more than that. The school, and the grandma tries to enroll Angel in a new school close to her home. She doesn't know about the McKinney-Vento Act that would allow Angel to stay with her teacher and her peers. And so Grandma, the school system allows Angel to enroll where Grandma lives, but she's got no records, no medical, immunization, all of that. The school puts her in general ed classes, not knowing what to do until they try to figure it out, because you don't want to put a child in a more restrictive environment than they're supposed to, right? So after a few days, it's probably more than a few days, but things are starting to fall apart, and Angel's stressed in the environment that she's in, and it starts to fall apart. And they discover, and talking to the caseworker, that there has been some mental health coverage or care that's been happening, but it was in a different county, and now we're in a new county, and Angel's disrupted from a lot of things. You can see how this would go. Meanwhile, Angel gets suspended from school because she's had a violent verbal interaction with her teacher. So we are seeing this again and again, which is how these agencies got together, and several of us in education at Wayne State, several of us faculty in social work are on the kind of the research arm trying to put this project together with our partners in those 4 agencies. And now we come to you. So how do we ensure a better practice across our systems? We first have to analyze what are these process barriers and have a clear understanding of what is getting in the way, and improve the data sharing and information flow between each other, even finding out who these people are in the other agencies that we're working with. I mean, in my schools that I've done work in over the years as a school psychologist, we often don't even know who's a foster child. When we did that survey recently, school psychologists, counselors, and school social workers don't know who the foster care children are. That's like a simple fact that seems easy to fix, right? But that's just one of many pieces in the puzzle that we need to work on. So we need to establish a new process. Our systems weren't originally set up this way. So this is our model. You have a copy of that there, and in it we have an advisory board of community stakeholders. At the bottom, that's our foundation. Then we've got our core team, which is who I just described a moment ago. And then the team will work to review and revise all these policies and procedures and the infrastructure and the whole process by which we share data and information and make plans, integrated, coordinated plans. I know it seems simplistic, but it's not, which is why we've spent 2 years now putting this together to get to this day and then beyond. But so the bridging team is all of those people that that is at the top listed there. We have Angel, again, who we would like to see have a better experience with all of this. So I plug all these systems back in, and we don't have those process barriers. We have a new process by which all of these systems communicate better, and Angel gets a coordinated plan. Teachers are involved. Teachers understand what's happening to Angel. They understand where she's come from and what are her needs and what behavior plans were in place. And the grandmother coordinates with everybody. The outside therapist coordinates with everybody. The schools and all of the people in the schools coordinate with everybody. So we'll come back to that in a few minutes. How will we do this? We have 6 general processes, each of which is on a slide after this, and I'm going to go very briefly through these. So first, we're going to solidify the core team. At the top of the slide is identified the first of 6 steps in our process. Identify who our team members are, including hiring what we call a bridging advocate, a person who would be funded through the process that the project that we're trying to get funded. One person per a certain number of kids across schools to help do the coordination, determining regular meeting times, format, modes of communication, to share policies and procedures, and begin addressing how are we going to make this work for kids. Second, develop a flow chart. We've actually developed an elaborate flow chart for how we can progress a child's case through all the systems so that we're all on the same page, and what are the responsibilities of each system. We're trying to fine-tune that. To improve expertise and capacity, we need to initiate professional development. So, for example, in schools, many of our teachers are not familiar with the concept of trauma-based teaching or trauma-informed teaching. Understanding you can't make the assumption that every child in child welfare has gone through trauma, but many, many have, right? So there's a lot of traumatic experience that we have to educate our teachers, and even I would argue our school psychologists, school social workers, school counselors, administrators. We have a lot to do to help understand where these kids have come from. Utilizing a cross-training approach is at the core of this entire project, and helping everybody understand natural constraints and barriers. Nobody's having these barriers on purpose. We know that. So we conceptualize schools as the ideal coordination hub. Kids are there for 8 hours a day. They're there more. I have 4 children. My kids are with my teachers more than they're with me collectively. And so I think if I had some major intervention happening, I would want that to be a really key place where we're focusing things. And these kids are bounced from a lot of different places. So we want to utilize school assistance teams, also called, different districts call them different things, strategies for student success. In DPS, we call them RCTs, resource coordination teams, school assistance teams, teacher assistance teams. There's a lot of different names for these, but these teams exist in schools, and if they don't, they need to be built, and that's part of what we have built into the plan for our project, is to create these in-school infrastructures that then, if they're not already there, many already have them, but then get them to be coordinating better outside with the other systems, gathering resources, assisting with the implementation, and providing the ongoing support. This, I think, is our 5th slide, or is this you now?
Yeah.
Yep, here we go.
So certainly to ensure quality control, we've built in an evaluation plan and a plan for sustainability of this project after pilot funding. Certainly as part of this, we want to document the implementation, so both process and outcome evaluation built in. We're evaluating how well our systems are communicating with each other, evaluating the process, addressing barriers along the way during the implementation phase, and then certainly tracking both system changes with the individual youth as well as how well systems are communicating with each other. In order to sustain this project long term, we're hoping to be able to manualize the intervention procedures so that it can be replicated beyond Wayne County, across the state of Michigan, ultimately looking at Michigan as a lead for this for other states across the country. This project, because of it's not owned by any one agency, is certainly designed so that the cost would be distributed across these various 4 major systems that equally own the issue and serve these children. And certainly developing policies and strategies for sustainability across those systems make this project not a heavy burden on any one particular system. So this model is designed to improve youth outcomes and youth success through coordination of expert knowledge and professionals that are linked directly to our young people in our schools, linked through the development of data sharing methods that are accessible by multiple agencies so that we're not recreating paperwork. In social work, when we teach, we tell students that it's really a paper-based profession, and that a lot of social workers and others get easily discouraged by what they feel as repetitive paperwork processes. So this idea is to align and streamline these processes to make it easier on all of these stakeholders to be able to understand the knowledge, understand and have knowledge of the needs of these young people, and to minimize that burden across systems. We're talking about using knowledge and practice-rich approach to ensure that youth reap the full benefits of all of these systems and that can maximize the effectiveness of the agency to disseminate that service, as well as maximize positive outcomes for the young people served by these systems. So each of our major 4 systems have particular outcomes that they want addressed. So this slide depicts each of those for our 4 major systems. For education, we're talking about decreasing time away from instruction. When kids are being sent out of the classroom, they're not learning. So we shouldn't be surprised that we're not graduating our students now. We're talking about decreasing disciplinary referrals. When we understand trauma and use a trauma-informed teaching approach, we are not suspending and expelling these students. They're staying in our classrooms. And when they stay in our classrooms, it means that our kids can graduate on time, and not only graduate on time, but have a vision for post-secondary pursuits. In the child welfare system, the priority is improving placement stability. When we communicate across systems and increase the number of supports, that we're not moving these foster kids from home to home to home because of foster parents are getting frustrated because they feel they don't have the supports they need to keep those children in the home. We're talking about better coordinated and improved transition plans. So as students are transitioning from middle school to high school, that there's a clear trajectory of what the education needs are for these students, so that when our high schools are receiving our middle school students who have worked in our program, they're fully equipped to keep and sustain this plan long into high school graduation and planning for post-secondary pursuits. From the mental and physical health care service side, we're talking about reducing risk behaviors. Many risk behaviors first become identified in the middle school age group. So if we can provide that supports now, that we can prevent early teen pregnancy and substance abuse issues and all of those things that surface, or we begin to see surfaced through school health system data at the high school level.
Contribute to dropout. Those things all contribute to dropout, yeah.
We're talking about increasing access and utilization of mental health services by providing and opening the doors for those mental health providers to come and provide those services in the schools with schools' knowledge of what's being worked on. From a court perspective, we're talking about better informed decision-making regarding the youth's academic and social and emotional functioning, so that our judges, when they're seeing their children every 90 days for those reviews, they're specifically asking about how is this child doing in the education system? What do we need to look at? That we're asking for grades, we're asking for our individual education IEPs, so that the judges understand what's going on and to ensure that the students are getting their education needs met. And that it's a priority rather than a secondary.
What we often have is a court-ordered evaluation for testing, which bogs schools down, and we often have all that information already.
Okay, so when we're talking about systems outcomes, each system effectiveness increases through cross-system communication, coordination, collaboration. So that's what we're trying to do is enhance that in every area, where partners are sharing responsibility for these youth success, where home and school permanency are a priority and a regular practice with foster care youth, where education success becomes a stronger focus when we're talking about well-being of young people in foster care, where we're talking about trauma-informed practices being integrated not just by mental health practitioners, but by the Child Welfare Agency, by our education institutions across these systems, and that we're reducing duplication and need for assessments, and that each system is not assessing this young person over and over and over again, which we know is also linked to re-traumatizing our young people.
And now the hard part.
So another handout in the back of the PowerPoint is our projected budget. And this is a functional budget prepared by the specific activities that we want to implement with this program. So we're talking about building curriculum for cross-system training. We're talking about developing operational practices for our school assistance teams to be able to work with foster care youth. We're talking about being able to provide school readiness assessments, again, training across our systems, where our child welfare workers, our teachers, our attorneys for our young people, and our mental health practitioners are learning together and better understanding each of the federal and state mandates that our institutions have to work under and be more sensitive to that. We're talking about implementing this program with a targeted number of schools, 10 to 15 schools that have been identified that have the largest numbers of foster care youth in the Wayne County area. Wayne County serves nearly 50% of all foster care cases in our state, so it is the natural place to conduct a pilot here. And if we can, again, show success here, that it can be rolled out across the state into other areas. This budget has a listing here for you of all the different activities that are proposed. And with the projected cost of, just shy of $1 million. I certainly want to let you know that we've had some success in private foundation asks that have agreed to come to the table to help us increase our ability to draw down federal resources to support such a project. Casey Family Programs out of Seattle is really excited about the initiative and has offered to provide a private match so that we can work with you here to figure out what public resources are available that could be aligned with that so that this project can be carried forward. We've also been speaking with the Annie E. Casey Foundation, who is extremely enthusiastic about this project. Both of those Casey institutions are actually the largest private philanthropists that serve foster care youth in the country. What Annie E. Casey has proposed is a commitment to fund the evaluation beyond the 3-year proposal so that we can actually longitudinally track these young people through high school graduation and beyond.
So in the, you can see the cost per year, and you see Casey's already commitment of already made commitment of $75,000 a year. The balance, how do we visualize?
And we want to see this project owned by all systems. So if we can have a conversation with the State Board of Ed of what would be realistic from the Michigan Department of Education side. So some specific education challenges that we've been informed of with our education partners is that if we're going to successfully cross-train teachers, we have to be able to afford subs in those classrooms so that teachers can actually participate, or some type of incentive if we're training over the summer, because teachers don't work in the summer. So there's these unique things that we need to work through so that we can bring all of these critical players to the table so that cross-training can be meaningful.
So if before we move to questions, if you have time for them or feel inclined to ask any, I always visualize this as being beneficial to all school kids, even though the pilot is specifically targeted at foster care kids. By proximity, the infectiousness of the process will benefit everybody, because when teaming like this goes in effect, everybody starts to benefit and generalize to other kids and cases. So everybody learns new skills and strategies. So I just wanted to point that part out as well. So.
We were
Great.
told to keep it short so there's time for questions, and we want to be able to do that.
If you have any at
Well,
this point.
thank you, excellent, and we'll open that up for questions from the board. Or comments, Michelle?
I was just going to mention, all of this rings true as a foster parent, and I remember, when I first became one, and we took kids with, we got very little information about the needs of the children that we took in. Here's asthma. This one has asthma. There's a machine somewhere that you got to hook on. I mean, very little intervention and really kind of thrown into the system. And I know I've taken kids who have dropped out of school, and I would go around and have to personally try to collect their transcripts, and just it was. And be asked to pay money because when they left and they dropped out of school, they didn't return their books, and I wouldn't be given transcripts unless I came up with like $400. I mean, so for foster parents who are trying to navigate this, and it was completely, it was very much discombobulated, and I've had referees who, when all the kids were not in school, say to me, well, that's really not my issue, that's the truant officer's issue. The judge, the court doesn't have to deal with their school issues even. So I see this as a great need, and from my personal experience, it would go a long way to creating some stability in these kids' lives who have a lot of instability. So I guess this isn't a question. More like, thank you for even venturing into this. And the last thing I wanted to say about the trauma-based curriculum, I think there's a lot of kids that may not be in foster care that experience trauma, and that would go, I think, a long way to addressing issues, whether it be disciplinary or mental health issues, to have that also. Anyway, so thank you, and I don't have any questions, just a statement.
Thank you, Dan. And Eileen?
Thanks for this. Interesting and provocative. I guess a couple of questions and a comment as well. Sorry, I was looking across the table at colleagues to judge their reaction to a couple. But I think I'm okay.
Just throw something.
I'm just going to go until people tell me to stop. Have you identified the pilot schools yet?
We would do it based on when we get the funding to start, we'd have to look where are the concentrations of kids in foster care. So we'll have to go where the kids are, but Wayne County.
So just a couple of quick recommendations about potential partners who are working with schools, at least in Detroit, if not Wayne County. Two in particular. One is that there's a consortium of schools across governance, charters, EAA, and DPS schools in Southwest Detroit that are working on a community schools initiative. I don't know if you're familiar with this particular body of work, but they're partnered with the school success coaches or what have you that DHS has started to provide. Yeah, I'm seeing head nods, like you're already maybe connected with.
Our Wayne RESA partners are back here, so
Okay.
I'm just tapping them if they.
So, if not, I mean, I can certainly maybe provide the information to Michelle, who can get it to you, or whatever. We'll figure out how to connect you. But it would be worth, they're already thinking about how to better connect, various community agencies and support services and so on to the school community there and the administration.
Right. We have actually had some conversations with, at least I have, with a few of them, but the issue with that is that their foster care is not the focus, so the interventions in the schools are for all of the students in the schools, where the foster care question has not been asked as of yet.
Exactly, which is why it seems to me it would be an even more powerful way to connect. So I get the power of running a pilot for foster kids, but if you can connect it to a larger institutional change effort, it just seems like you might be able to, I won't say ride the coattails of that change effort, but like once the needle is in, the thread is sure to follow, kind of a thing.
That is absolutely true. We also are trying to think about, before scaling up bigger, number one rule in research is to really try, to be able to know what you're scaling up and do it right, to do it really right, small first. And that was our thought. But absolutely, maybe we can even connect and do something, keep it small, keep it tight, and then know what you're really scaling up.
And it's 5 schools, so you would still have plenty of opportunity to pilot with schools that weren't a part of that family of, so on and so forth.
Oh, the one you're talking about is 5 schools? Okay.
So that's one.
Michelle, will you get that name from him? Okay, thank you.
2 is, just really quickly, is there an intersection? So I'm familiar with, I think they're called youth development accounts, which would provide for funds for kids as they age out of foster care based on,
Yeah, and what I want to let you know about that is certainly child welfare is definitely a huge partner here and has helped with the development of this proposal. Currently, the program that you're citing now is restricted to only students 14 and older, which means they're only hitting high school students. And our proposal is focusing, we're saying that waiting till high school is too late, and that because we understand that high school graduation is predictive of success in 9th grade, that we need an intervention to start earlier, and that the current programs that are available do not target middle school students at all.
3, this is a really quick one, and then 4. 3 is, are you envisioning a central coordinator? So at the end of the day, is there a single person responsible for coordinating the various folks, or are you really looking at a kind of a collective impact model where there's representatives from multiple folks who come together periodically to
I'd say it has
change
I would say both is the answer to that. So we have our bridging advocates that are responsible basically for holding the systems accountable and making sure balls don't drop. So that's what the bridging advocates roles are. And we envision those bridging advocates to be operating out of Wayne Risa, to kind of do that check system on all the other systems to make sure this is being done, and it's not an added burden, to another school social worker's caseload who has 400 kids and now has to try to run this. We believe that's an unrealistic approach if we want to do this well. So we see the bridging advocate as being that serving that coordination function with each of those systems, but we are definitely expecting to hold each system accountable in providing representatives in those bridging teams, so that if a child has a diagnosed severe emotional disturbance or SED, and they have a therapist through Detroit Wayne Community Mental Health, that therapist from Detroit Wayne Community Health is going to be attending those school team meetings, so that the school has a clear understanding of what the goals and objectives are being covered in that therapeutic session. Oftentimes, those psychological evaluations have already been done, so the school's not paying to do those, because that information can be shared. So that's one example of how that would work.
Right. And then last point, and maybe you can tell us really quickly, what's the greatest, on average, or maybe even just give us like the highest level of intensity, what percentage of a school student body might be foster kids? I mean, what's the highest number you would see?
It ranges. I would say Detroit Public Schools probably has an overrepresentation of foster care youth. Foster care youth in general tend to be concentrated in lower performing schools, which means they have added barriers to become successful as adults. So I can't say there's a certain percentage that would exist in any school, because it would differ by school.
We have
so
raw
in
numbers.
Detroit, I mean, are we talking 5% or 20%? Like, what just rough, like, how many kids are we
What's the
talking
raw
about?
number?
Well, for example, like Vistam or Clara B. Ford Academy, the answer is 100%.
Oh, well, no, so not a specialty
So,
school.
yeah.
Like, I mean, just a general admission.
Didn't you say
BPS.
17% earlier?
That's
Yeah.
special.
It's
That's
17% would be the general special ed population, so our foster care youth would be smaller than that.
But there's like 6,000 something foster care students in Wayne County, right, Kathy? Is that, or you know?
So I guess the point, last point, and then I'll shut up, is, so I've talked about this before, just given the transformation of public education in the state, where kids move between districts so much more frequently, it seems like foster kids actually are maybe at the front edge of this and have been doing this for a much longer period of time. But there's a need, given that reality, for what I keep calling data backpacks. It's the point that the data follows the student, the same way that I don't know, medical records aren't a great example, but like the data should belong to the student, presumptively, as opposed to belonging to the district or to the school or to the state, presumptively, so that wherever that student goes, the data presumptively follows. That new district, once they say this student belongs to us now, or is it, has access to all of that data by presumption. I know there's some state law that allows parents to get access to their student data, but it's not well known and well understood, I think. I just, as part of this world that we are increasingly living in, it just seems to me that data should automatically follow kids, and we haven't figured out how to change the system to make that happen.
That's a lot of what we're hoping to do, and if I use that term, are you the author of that term, data backpack?
Somebody in Texas, I believe.
Okay,
is the
because that's a
author of that.
great term.
And the unique challenge with foster kids is it's not just school data following the kid, but the mental health data, the child welfare data, the court data. So the data needs and understanding what's going on with that child is much larger when you're talking about a court-involved student.
I think to tag on it, it's not just the data following anymore. I think we've made a leap in technology where the centerpiece becomes the child and everything else. I mean, if I can, on my family clan Facebook, which I dare not get out to the regular world, but there's about 30 in there, and it pops up one day about so-and-so's birthday, and suddenly everyone's weighing in around the centerpiece of this person's birthday. That they're the center. We're all reacting to that. They're not reacting to us. So there's got to be, I hear some talk in DTMB about trying to make that a reality in some ways, but it's almost leapfrogging past following that everything's around them. So you're not shopping as Michelle was to try to find out where do I get my transcripts. We're already and prepared and feeding into we understand the
The
child's needs.
state of
and-
things right now is that it isn't like that.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
We're
I mean,
trying
I-
to-
But I'm saying, I think we have the capacity to leapfrog to that with the way technology, even on things that are far less important, obviously, I'm trying, Facebook is fine, but they've got that.
Right.
Right.
And if we could move to actually having these other system partners, so for example, if a psych eval's been done on a student, that we find a way to have, the mental health system get that to the school, right, in this shared system, so that you have immediate access to information that you need to make educational decisions for that student.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I think Kath was next, then Eileen. Kathleen, please.
Well, thank you very much for this report. My daughter-in-law has been worked with foster children in California, and I heard many of the same problems existed there, and probably every place.
Yes, California is actually known for having the best system in the country, where they've actually developed this data sharing infrastructure that we're proposing. California's already piloted it, this idea of how do we share data from across education and child welfare institutions,
Oh,
and
that's-
and they've implemented at a statewide level. It's very exciting.
Oh, that's good. I've talked to her about this, I guess. Anyway, this idea of bringing all the departments, all the players together is so obvious, and yet it's never done.
Because it's
So it would
hard.
be great if you could make it work.
We think we have a
That
team
would
of
be
people
wonderful.
together who can conceptualize how to do that, and
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, we've had interagency committees at the state level, and we've had all kinds of things at the county level. And
So we're talking about more than a
The next thing I know,
report.
they're not meeting anymore.
Right.
They sort of fall apart, so
So we're moving from recommendations to implementation.
very, very good. There's a state board for foster care children too, I believe, isn't there? There used to be.
Through the Michigan Youth Opportunity Initiative, there is an opportunity, there's what they call the state board for those young people. It's limited or restricted to only foster care youth who participate in the Michigan Youth Opportunity Initiative. So currently, there's slightly less than 500 youth across the state participating. They have to be between the ages of 14 and 21 to participate. So they certainly provide some voice.
Oh, so would any state agencies be involved in this, or was it just a local?
Our model proposes that we align, we're piloting at the local level, but the goal is that we develop policies and procedures with our state partners with the intended goal of developing a model that's scalable statewide. So we
Okay.
intend to use that dual approach.
Well, I hope, good luck, this should work, I mean, it would really, and what you said about, well, if you get them to working for the foster children, it would be a model to use for everybody.
Right.
It would be very helpful. We've been talking about that too. I've been talking about getting social services and health services in the schools, and it really helps.
And what's unique about starting with foster care youth is we do have federal law supporting this idea with the ASA Act, or the USA Uninterrupted Scholars Act, which is actually federally mandates that child welfare and education institutions need to be talking to each other. So through this pilot, we hope to be able to ensure that we can provide that information for federal reporting that the Michigan Department of Ed and the Michigan Department of Human Services is now federally mandated to do.
Oh, good. Okay.
mandated to do it, but didn't say how.
Right, there is no clear direction on how to operationalize that.
Well,
So
thank you
we're
very
hoping this
much for
model is
putting this
agreeable to
together
you.
and developing it and make
Thank
it
you.
work.
Eileen, please.
Yeah. So this is the best presentation that I hope we don't need in 5 years. Okay? It is terrific information. I'm delighted that you're doing it. It's really necessary. But what we really need is structural reform, because what this is a Band-Aid add-on to try and solve a horrible problem for kids who are trying to grow up in a swamp anyway, and they're having to find high water, or high ground. I appreciate very much that you're doing the work. The things that popped into my mind is to how to make it, make the reach as far as possible, because unfortunately, it's people, so it's going to be expensive. And it's going to be expensive to do the data reform, but that is the answer, at least to get the data in a usable format so that people can look beyond their job. A court-appointed, a social worker could look at grades to try and figure out, where the child stands. Maybe there's confidentiality on some of the things that people can't see all the records, but at least there's a chance at it. it immediately pops into my mind because I always think backwards is, does this belong in ed schools? Does this problem belong at being discussed in ed schools? It certainly does for guidance counselors, and I don't know where it is, whether that is in their course of study in preparation. And then the other question I wanted to ask, to throw even more people, with the spotlight, where's the high ground? What role do CASA have, the court-appointed special advocates? I don't know whether every foster child gets one.
CASAs look very different in some counties, and some counties have them and some counties don't.
Okay.
And that even in counties that provide it, not every foster child is appointed a CASA. It's up to an individual judge to actually appoint a court-appointed special advocate, and it's up to the judge's discretion who gets a CASA and who doesn't.
But when they do, is there a way to fit them into this picture?
Absolutely. We would love to have them attend our cross-training and be part of the court system aspect to do this. Yeah, they could easily be integrated.
And do CASAs take on sequential children? Do they ever have more than one?
Yes, to
So
both.
you may be a little more bang for the buck than, yeah. And I also agree, I just feel that every teacher should be able to recognize a child in trauma. It's as simple as that. In a middle school, when we know that the case is being framed for dropping out or not, it's terrifying to think that this is going on without support. So thanks.
Well, thank you. This is just excellent, nice addition again. We had two really outstanding presentations. Well, three. Our guys did a great job, too. But we're used to that a little more. And I want to recognize, Kath and I worked together. I don't know if you remember, both when we were 20 years ago this week, I started as superintendent at Wayne Risa, and we were both, like 18, I think, then. But I'm glad you're sticking with it and working this through, Kath. I know that adds a lot to the,
She's
I'll bet.
been an
Adds a
impeccable
lot.
partner in this process. We love her.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
very
you again
much.
so much.
Thank you, and Daniel, I would love to see the names.
I've made a
Thank you.
note to send it to forward it to Michelle already.
Excellent.
And Michelle knows how to contact us if you have any follow-up questions as well.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dan's got a backpack for you on the way out.
Yeah.
Some prizes together in it. Well, thank you, that's been great. And going to President's Report, like,
I have nothing more to report.
Okay. I have a little lengthier one today because there's a couple of important issues that I want to make sure we're aware of. And one, to be candid, I want to say, before our folks go to a hearing tomorrow. I'm going to wait for this. Just because it's connected to legislation. Please, go ahead. But I just want to mention, tomorrow's a key day because I know that, my understanding are several board members are going to show up at the joint fifth hearing tomorrow, where our folks are going to present to the joint House and Senate hearing tomorrow afternoon regarding the Michigan Department of Ed report on options for assessments aligned with the state standards. And we're going to be represented by Joseph and Vince and Wendy. They'll be asked to make a presentation on the report. We're obviously going to show. We would dare not. In fact, I should probably put the better spin on that. We're happy to be given the opportunity, just like when I do deficit reports. The thing I'm trying to get on the table, though, is I know that the legislature has a keen interest in this. There are other parties that are talking to them at length. So we really appreciate every opportunity to show them the depth of knowledge and research that our team here has put together. What the heck's happened here? Someone?
Teeing up Gary's.
Okay, Gary. Thanks, Gary. But that we have regarded with respect to assessments. And I guess to cut to the chase, that's our call. And it's one thing to present to the legislature. The reason you have a Department of Ed is so that there's not politics around choices, especially with something that has such high stakes involved for teachers with the new laws that these very legislatures have put in place on accountability. I think you need, and I would be saying this 2 years from now when I'm not here, that this is the place for that. These aren't political decisions. And I'm going to say, I'm hopeful that tomorrow that'll be the approach that the Joint Committee takes when they want to understand this better. That makes sense. Our guys, as you know, reported last month. They did a great job on the assessment report. I've literally gotten national feedback on this, that other states North Carolina, my counterpart, I was there this weekend, we had a board retreat, and she sent it to all her board members. I mean, they're using this as the basis to a lot of their own work on trying to decide what to do on assessments. So I guess I'm saying we are happy for the opportunity. It's our call.
Have you had feedback that it's not our call?
We'll see tomorrow.
Well, the
I
other
know-
thing that I said to the legislative committee is that I've not heard that.
Okay.
But I'm not plugged in the last couple of weeks. And everything I did hear in December was that this was along the lines of report because we need to spend money. You know, we need to weigh how much we can give you.
That makes perfect sense.
And in this particular case, it's actually an advantage, as we discussed on the legislative committee phone call, because they required the interim assessments that we didn't believe that the department could afford. And we were saying that if it were going to be done, it'd have to be a district cost. So if they're willing to pick that up because they believe it's important to the program, it'd be a huge asset.
Okay, well, that would be
See,
great.
yeah.
I'm going to remain optimistic then. Thank you for that. And then I thought, we talked a little bit about laying, I wish I'd forgotten that's on me, but to lay the groundwork when I know there's some science folks left here who are interested, but the whole team earlier, because we agreed I'd kind of lay out, we share with the board, but lay out kind of our thinking about this. And so this is a chance to lay just a little bit of the plan for the adoption of the state's revised science standards. As you recall, I guess it was last May's board meeting, our Office of Education Improvement and Innovation sought feedback on the NGSS, on the Next Generation Science Standards. And in addition to asking for feedback, staff also posed questions regarding implementation of those standards. Nearly 300 people responded to the survey. They were overwhelmingly favorable. Some individuals raised questions with the implementation process for the new standards. And the proposed new standards map out for schools the connections across grades, across core ideas, and across disciplines based on research on science and science learning. So, I mean, for instance, instead of learning a biology concept in isolation, research suggests students should study a scientific problem grounded in biology, but requiring chemistry, physics, and mathematics concepts as well as reading and writing skills. And the approach to science education will require MDE staff to work across offices, which will be just furthering what we've been trying to do with getting rid of our silos here in the department anyway, to resolve some of these issues. And among some of these issues is, certification of teachers, assessments, instructional design, instructional resources. And then to get on the table, there's groups like Fordham Institute that have raised issues with the Next Generation Science Standards, and it's been raised by some board members here appropriately. So our curriculum instruction staff are working with state experts on ways to address the issues raised in that report and understand it better. MDE staff would like to take the necessary time to study the issue raised, all these issues raised, and implement a timeline prior to returning to the board recommending approval of the revised standards. And just, for example, we want to do additional work to understand the structures that need to be in place to support a transition to updated science standards. For example, the instructional supports and the training of pre-service teachers. Whether it's NGSS or not, updated standards require a different understanding of science and instruction, things like project-based learning. We'd like additional time to study the standards. Although widely supported, there's concerns and differing opinions, and the role of the department is to gather all evidence and share with the board for your consideration before approval. So we need time to develop corresponding assessment timeline. It includes understanding options for types of assessment, when those might be available. We don't want standards we can't assess. So bottom line is we've worked together as a team, and last Friday, I guess it was, we came up with this and shared it with the board. But our necessary timeline to advance the standards for board approval, it includes public comment on implementation between now and then with the field and other stakeholders. A presentation we anticipate with all the other work I just outlined that would be made to the board at the November board meeting. A presentation of the proposed standards to the legislature following that, per John's advice with what we ran into with Common Core. We thought it was appropriate after the board has a shot. And then have it come back to the board in December for final approval. And, we worked hard in this to try to preserve also the state board's constitutional role. This is the state board's decision, not the department's, not the legislature, respectfully. And we do need to hear from them as we do. They're obviously an important constituency and do fund us, so we want to make sure that they've had and I think they will offer. We have some folks over there that I think are very thoughtful about this and will offer some ideas that will help us help you make a better decision in December. So we think to do it right, that's the general outline for our work.
It seems like a long time. It's a whole year. And we've been talking about these standards now for several months. I think it's good that we want to prepare, but are we putting the cart before the horse? Should we be telling the districts I assume we're going to want to adopt these standards, that we said we want to adopt them, but we want to prepare for it so that we give them some indication that it's not up in the air?
Board thoughts on that? Eileen, John?
I don't think it's the science standards. I mean, there's several issues here. The real one for me is the math standards, because unfortunately, these are STEM standards. This is science, technology, engineering, math. And what I'm waiting to hear from the department, one of the things that Fordham and others have brought up, a couple of things. One is that because just like the new math standards, the Common Core standards, it goes down in great depth. Whether it's, you remember the inch wide, inch deep, mile wide, yeah. So it's when you do that, instead of going like this and that deep, when you do this and go this deep, there are things you can't cover. So, for example, I've heard that, and I've seen in print, that physics in high school is not a full physics course under Next Gen, because it isn't necessary to convey the standards that are designed, as they're designed. And it may be a problem as we work our way through this, unlike Common Core, where there was agreement with major universities across the country that if you passed a Common Core English language and math curriculum, that you would not have to have remediation in college. Mm-hmm. It's possible that if you're coming out of Next Gen, that you may have to have more science initially in college or additional classes in high school to be able to get into a research-based institution. We just need those questions answered. And then the other problem that Bill Schmidt has brought up, and other people have too, is that it appears that Common Core math and Next Gen math are not completely aligned. So at this point, jumping into Common Core, the question is how much can you throw at math teachers initially to try and make sure that we really do make this instructional change for quality in math. So those are just, I mean, I don't know those. Just all I can do is raise them and pass them on. But to not answer them when they're out in the public and to just go forward with yet another set of standards that impacts what we've just done, particularly with the assessment not having been decided on and put in place yet, is a lot. So it's a question of workload for the department. It's a question of doing it right. If you got it done before then, I expect that we would probably hear that and we could act on it earlier. But
I mean, we integrate this with the rest of our work plans, and so it is pretty thoughtfully done, and we think that's what would manage the whole body of work beyond the science standards that we have.
Yeah, and
John
I
and
really
then Gary.
appreciate the both moving the process, but thoughtful outline of the steps we need to work through, which we need to trust, I think, and it will produce the right outcome, because we do need to update our standards. I'm delighted the department feels positioned to begin to move the steps towards updating our standards. The kind of thoughtful examination of what's in the Next Gen, what are issues around it, other issues around how we would implement it. That will, I think, by being thoughtful, open input from all stakeholders and experts, will guarantee a good outcome. And the fact that we begin it is a good sign, and we'll get to the end of the road having, I think, not only reassured each other, but iterated whatever the right variant of the standards are to be the best ones possible, and that is a good thing. So I think delighted that we get started and appreciate the mapping out of the roadmap, and I would encourage us to support this process. It will get us to the right outcome, I'm pretty sure.
Thank you, John. Gary?
I wanted to ask a follow-up question to your comment. I was unfamiliar that the Next Generation Science Standards included explicit core disciplinary ideas for math and technology.
Well, I didn't know that.
I didn't know it was math standards too.
Yeah, it is. It's science, technology, engineering, and math. And Bill Schmidt, Professor Schmidt, I don't know, at Michigan State, the man who designed TIMSS, has been adamant since last winter that they're not aligned. So we just need an answer on that, because
Yeah.
if they're not, then for every math teacher out there who's trying to change their practice for Common Core, to then get hit and say, have somebody say, well, if you teach that, it's going to take up time, and we need this for science. It just needs to be juggled. And most states aren't jumping into implementation yet, so those answers aren't there. And it's just a question of saying to our state, which has gone through a lot on Common Core, we've thought about this, and we know what the answers are, and here they are.
And we can make the manual for the other states.
Right, right. They're using our work now.
Consumers
We ought to
report.
be sending them invoices.
If I could
That's
just.
what
I have Diane, as you say, but when we get these in November, that then we would present them to the legislature?
I was kind of following John's model of when he
It- it-
suggested during Common
Given
Core.
the, not only discussion we went through, but even the legislation that passed, or the resolution that passed on the Common Core, was very sensible, keeping the responsibility over here for setting standards for learning, but ensuring that we have active communication with the legislature, including sharing those standards as part of the process. That's what we not only agreed to, we encouraged as part of the resolution to solve the Common Core episode. Let's make sure we're developing the standards with the expertise here. But let's make sure the legislature feels and is fully invested and involved, so that they can't say after the
Then we
fact.
will have done this for a year, and then we're going to give it to them to listen for a year before.
It's keeping the decision-making here, but ensuring that there's good communication and answering questions that they may have, and that they aren't hopefully moved again to say, oh, we so much disagree with what you're doing, we're going to defund you, to give them every good evidence that there's good, sensible, thoughtful education policy shaping going on over here, and they'll be comfortable to not defund the process, and that's a good outcome.
You just said it explicitly, and I appreciate the candor on that. That's part of what we're trying to work towards, is not have the same, what would you call it, that we ran into with Common Core.
Well, it was usefully wasted time, in the sense, I think it
Yes.
cleared out a lot of the underbrush and misconceptions.
Okay.
And, when Richard and I go testify for Common Core, it helps communicate, this is not the evil, you didn't use evil exactly, Richard. This is not the destructive thing that some are assigning to it, and it's not the panacea that others are. It is what it is. It's a good, focused update of our math and language arts standards that were pretty rigorous already. So let's make it, and we want to do this, we want to have the same kind of dialogue and understanding around science standards, other standards, which we want to keep doing, updating. That's our job, periodically, as we update our school improvement plan, as some of the folks pointed out.
Right, and if I can just throw in one more comment, we're in such an information age that the questions that we brought forward in this process are all on the internet. So to not address those and to walk in at any point to the legislature saying, hi, here's your briefing, we're going to get those questions back at us. So in this particular case, it makes no sense not to answer them in advance.
And be ready, yeah.
And I think your plan was including, inviting legislators to ask their questions or to
Right.
give us their concerns now, not 9 months from now, but that we
That's what I
would.
was thinking, we shouldn't wait till
No,
November.
we're going
to
to
tell them
get
what
their
we're doing.
concerns. I think it's part of the process that Mike and his team laid out. What we would formally, after we've looked at them, share our.
It'll be a formal presentation to a committee. But before that, Wendy and our team, I mean, it's mostly what I described. Some of this that I just said in passing is, we've also, I very rarely say anything like this, because it sounds like we're complaining about our own staffing and stuff, but we're trying to fit things in that we actually believe we can accomplish over a 12-month period. And there's a lot of work. It's not just that we're sitting around now waiting for science standards. And these are the same people. So we're trying to fit in and do this in a more thoughtful way the last few years, the workload of the same people that are going to be dealing with 4 or 5 different issues. It's why, just as an aside, I mean, we're happy to have gotten the compliments on the assessment report and all that, but it just shut us down for weeks and stopped everything dead, particularly in a couple of divisions. And you know, it was a little distressful because, well, it was stressful for the team, but a little distressing only because it wasn't used the next day anyway. We knew that legislature wasn't back for a while after that, so July, that deadline. But I would give credit to Wendy on this, that, you know, she's developed some relationships that I think increase the chances we have these dialogues before they hit the fan. And to Kathy's point, those are going to be going on. But the formal presentation, perhaps of some board members, if you chose to, however you want to do it, would be between that November and December meeting. I think it was Richard, then Michelle, and then Gary.
I really appreciate the timeline. I think it's a good one. The fact that we're going to make the major decisions after the election is probably a good idea. One of my biggest things that I'm looking forward to as we discuss these is how much change do these standards imply for our teachers, our professional development, how we support, and so on and so forth. Talk to some people, say this is going to change the whole game, and others who, in my reading of the framework, I didn't think it was that, although there was some of that language in parts of the framework. But if it's changing the whole game, then how do we know we're even, I mean, then the whole question arises, are we even teaching science, or what we used to teach wasn't science, or what we are going to teach isn't what we thought science was, and then if it's not what we thought it was, then why is it required when, how do we know it was required when we adopted it, 50 years ago, whatever. So
I'll be Abbott, you can be Costello.
Yeah, there we go. And candidly, if big influence for me is going to be how much change do we understand, or with or without me, I think that MDE and teachers will going to need to know, and maybe we can ferret that out by November. So how much change in the way we're doing things these new standards really imply, and I think that's a chief thing that we need to work out.
That will take work, and that is what we'll have better answers for. And if I didn't say this earlier, we have third-party validation on this that has to fit in somewhere before we want to bring it to you.
Sure.
So, I mean, there's issues related. There's a lot of questions that we want to be ready for and not do this in kind of a half baked way.
Yeah. And on the other hand, I want to underline the point. I think it's extremely important to have a timeline, and so now we have an answer for people who are asking.
Yeah, that was, I think, the gist of what John had promised, and we wanted to be forthright about that. Michelle, and then Gary.
It might just be some stupid questions for clarification for me. So the Common Core Math is set to go 2014-15? When is that going in and being implemented?
I mean, you approved it. You approved it 308.
So right now, schools are going to be assessed on Common Core Math, or?
Right now, schools are teaching Common Core Math.
Some are.
We don't have an aligned.
Yeah.
That's what we're working towards with the assessment.
So there's supposed to be, right, so the 14 year, some schools, I know not all, are doing Common Core Math, right?
So the issue is after standards are adopted, it usually takes 2 to 3 years to get an assessment that is aligned, developed, and in place.
Okay.
So the standards were adopted some time ago, 2010, and we had extra time because it was such a significant shift in terms of depth of knowledge that people are expecting for students, that it's actually 14-15 is the year that it goes in place. So we had an extra year essentially because of the significance of the change to get that in place, and an extra year over what is normal for school districts to be ready to be assessed on something.
Okay, so they'll be assessed in 15 at the end of
14-15.
14, okay. So then the next generation standards so they are not approved standards, or they are approved standards? They're not approved? Okay, they're not approved by, okay, so.
They would by December.
They are compiled, correct?
Oh, yeah.
So they're out there, and these next generation standards were compiled by who?
A group of experts, 28 lead states, Achieve was the lead.
Oh, so it's just like Common Core?
Not exactly.
Well, kind of. Maybe not exactly, but similar.
Very similar.
Okay. So
I
Achieve.
see Gary did them. Gary did
Gary,
them.
oh, thank you, Gary. So I'm just wondering how long it would take to get them aligned, the math standards to the, I mean, they're out there. I mean, and they've been out, it sounds like they've been out there for a long time, and the same, Achieve is the same people, same, I mean, I'm speaking to Kathy's question. I know you have to be careful, but I do worry about this starting in 10 and not being implemented till 15, taking 5 years instead, and of 1 year. And I'm just not saying why if this is an issue, why it's so difficult to address that math issue that Eileen, you brought up.
So if I can respond to you. If you, and the staff certainly knows maybe much further ahead on this than I am. I just know that the question has been raised about physics, which is significant. And I know that Professor Schmidt has been concerned verbally, and so have others, that the material that's being required to cover the standards for math, for Common Core math, don't match the standards that are to be covered in Smarter Balanced, or in Next Gen. Is that accurate to say? Is that the right way to say it?
Vanessa?
Well, I think I want to underscore something Mike just said. I think one of the things we want to do in the next couple months is exactly that. So there are people who are saying they're not aligned, and there are people who are saying they are aligned.
Yeah.
And so we want to dig into that.
Yes.
Both for ourselves, but also with a third party, because we want the answer just as much as you do. And if they're not aligned, then we need to know where not, so we can support teachers in the transition.
Exactly.
Or whatever we need to do, but it's not a clear answer right now. There's
Yes,
camps.
and the answer that comes may not impact our moving forward on Next Gen. It may be minor.
Right.
But we need to get there.
But if you would never want schools to drop their current instruction in things like physics and jump wholeheartedly into Next Gen, only to discover that they had dropped courses that children need for college. And they shouldn't have to discover that by themselves. That's our job, and the question's been raised, so it needs to be addressed.
I agree. I'm just wondering why it seemed, and maybe I'm underestimating the effort or how much it would take, but if it's been out there for so long, both of them, I'm just wondering why.
No. Smarter Balance was adopted in 2010.
Right.
Next Gen was approved last May or June in 2013.
So
we were consumed with Common Core until just recently.
Right, but I'm just wondering, maybe it doesn't have to be us, but and maybe it takes a year to decide whether they're aligned or not and how to get them together. But my only question is, I'm just having a hard time understanding why it takes, I think it's an important issue, why it would take that much time.
So Michelle, let me just
Given that all
turn
the
this back to the
experts-
staff
Yeah.
and say to you one more time, it's STEM, it's not science.
Right, but that's what I'm
Huge,
saying.
huge difference.
Because you're saying the math has to be aligned in both. So the math from the Common Core math and the math in the Next Gen STEM, whatever, should be aligned. And I'm just saying, I'm just having a hard time understanding why the process would take a year.
Okay, and then one more thought for you. The assessment isn't under development yet. Okay, most states that have adopted it, there's 9 now. Okay, there is no Next Gen assessment currently under development. When we do, am I right on this? When we do adopt Next Gen or some other science standards, because they do need to be revised, we've got to get them going. We will still have to do our own interim assessment unless something dramatic happens with Next Gen. And there's a commonly developed assessment. And how long did it take to do Park and Smarter Balanced, multi-state?
It ended up being a 4-year process. Typically, it's a 3-year process, was a 4-year process again because of the complexity. Really kind of a game changer in the way we were talking about assessment. Because it was such a big deal there, that's the reason that it takes as long. I think that there's just a lot, so in terms of why we're looking at a year, it really is looking at the kinds of questions that Vanessa was talking about. Are they aligned, are they not aligned? More information about essentially what it is compared to high-quality science standards elsewhere, looking at how that compares to our existing standards, just to see how much of a change that is for our teachers. So giving people much more full information, particularly giving the board much more full information about what it means to make this move.
If I can build on
And to be
Joseph's
honest, I'm going to just say this, to give me better information before I put my name on it to bring to you to approve. I mean, we sometimes skip over that, and because it's not necessary to bring that up every time at this meeting, but I spent a lot of time with the team when they're finally resolved. We spend a long time to make sure that I and the rest of the team are comfortable with it before we're bringing it here for public consumption, especially then when it's something as important as this for your approval.
And can I just add, and also, it's not like the team here has nothing else to do, meaning we've got Common Core, assessment, implementation issues ongoing. So I am pleased and happy and thank everybody for being not only willing but eager to kind of advance the attention to the next gen or the next science standards in the thoughtful way that Joseph and Vanessa were describing, to wrestle truthfully with these issues. People say it's, these are good. People say these aren't so good. What is the truth? How do you independently validate it? How does it react to our current standards? So I think it's a good process, and I think it's good of us to begin, and I really appreciate the engagement on it.
Well, see, I'm wondering, I'm not saying that like if Achieve is involved, and if it's a nationwide effort, like the Smarter Balance was, I'm not saying, why, if this is such an important issue, why isn't there somebody even beyond the department looking at this if it's such a
Can I just
critical issue?
remind us all that for some, Achieve is like the evil empire of federal standard setting. So it is much healthier to have our department and the expertise here independently scrutinize in public the quality of these standards and the percept and do the steps that have been outlined, so that in part, if Achieve was involved, we're making our own assessment, as was in the Common Core debate. This is not, we're not taking orders from Achieve people here. We're developing in Michigan the best next generation of science standards, whatever those may be.
So did we change the Common Core then, from what was proposed?
We can and we will.
Okay, I'm just wondering if we did in this whole 5-year process change anything.
Well, I think Joseph, from my point of view, we adopted the Common Core in 2010.
Right.
At that point, no one anticipated that we'd have hiccups 3 years later. The assessment, it was a big enough change that the assessment regime was more than the usual 2 years plus. We don't anticipate, there's a time cycle here for the next wave of science standards and the next wave of assessments to put them in place. We have to make sure we're doing it well, thoughtfully, objectively, and that it stands the public scrutiny of same.
Thank you.
Well stated.
Answering my questions.
Gary and then Kath.
I just wanted to say that, well, I've reviewed the Fordham Institute's study. I've reviewed the Next Generation Science Standards ad nauseum. I've been training workshops on it all over the state for the past year. I also have been teaching physics for 7 years. I don't see that the standards devoid physics at the high school level of being a course called physics that contains all of the content that a physics teacher would want it to be. That's with my physics teacher hat on. With my teacher representative at this table voice, I know that science scores in our state are one of the concerning areas. They might be the most concerning area of all of our assessment data. And so I think that really points out that our current standards, whether they be better or we don't know yet than the Next Generation Science Standards, don't seem to be serving our needs to help students become better at science. And so I would really love to work with whoever at the department is involved in the process of vetting the Next Generation Science Standards or qualifying them for the board going forward. And also, I want to learn more about the math piece, so maybe we can talk more, because I'd like to learn about that. I mean, the Fordham Institute says that there's not a lot of math in the Next Generation Science Standards, enough to qualify it to partner with the Common Core math. And so in that way, I think about how we already are with standards. They're not curriculum. I know you all know this. But thinking with my teacher hat on, we're saying this is the standard. Districts have the ability to design curriculum to meet those standards, and right now that's what they do. So the high school where I teach physics, the ninth graders take algebra and they take earth science. There's very little math involved in earth science that they're learning in algebra. But then you go to another school where they take biology in ninth grade, or another school where they take physics first in ninth grade. And so to look at how math and science are aligned with one another, as far as the standards goes, I think is separate than how the curriculum is designed at a school or district level. And so I'd love to work with all of you on looking into some of those nuances. Because I think that there's a lot of good in the next generation science standards. They're ranked as equivalent to us by the Fordham Institute's report. And I think that they would be, I mean, they are.
C minus, but what they're hoping for is that we'll get up to an A. So we just don't know what the A is, whether it's really next gen or something
Well,
else.
the Science Teachers Associations have, as
So-
Fordham criticized Next Gen, they've criticized and blasted the Fordham study.
Right.
So we need to get to the truth, whatever it is, about what these things are, and that's the process that I think we're
Absolutely.
encouraging.
And I'd love to be part of that, because just in looking at it, I think if we had standards and our scores were really high, this conversation would sound perhaps differently. And that's not the case. So I'd love to work with all of you on it.
We need your help.
Great. Kathleen, and then Dan?
I know we've had a couple of presentations on next generation standards, but it's obvious that I'm not clear on what's in them at this point, because I didn't realize it had math in the next generation science, or that physics is sort of eliminated or something. I was not aware of that. Is it possible for us to get another summary or something of what's actually in these science standards that we're talking about? And the other thing I wondered, as the staff works on this for the next year, the whole year,
10 months.
is it possible that we could get a brief update as they're doing it, so we get informed on what they're working on throughout the year, so that by the time it's presented to us as a package, it's not going to be a new thing. We will know what they're talking about. So
Yeah.
it's not all, maybe every other month or something that you put.
I mean, we can, through the two vehicles.
Progress reports, in other
A
words.
monthly report and/or board meetings as appropriate, yeah. We could do something.
Thank you.
Dan?
I just want to acknowledge everybody at the table and for the wonderful presentations. I think public comment we've had the last 2 months. There's obviously a lot of urgency and significance around this issue, and just pleased to see folks caring about it as much as they are, including all of us. So that's just a quick acknowledgement, but more to the point of what has been discussed already heretofore. Haha.
That U of M lawyer
Those
thing.
$5
Add to the
words.
giddiness, that's right, after a long meeting. So I don't hear anybody arguing that this has to take a year. I think what's happened, if I get it right, is that the department has outlined a process that would have it on our agenda in November, I think it was, November 9th.
In November, we're going to have a
Right.
finance report, too. You got to think about that. That's a little much for one meeting.
In any event, I guess what I'm proposing is, if the process goes along more quickly, smoothly than anticipated, I don't think there's any, reason it couldn't come before us earlier. I'm not anticipating that it would, but I don't want us to interpret the timeline as look, it would come to us in November. It seems to me we could just as easily interpret it as, it will come to us by November. If it is done in October or September, that's fine. You guys have a work plan. I don't want to disrupt the work plan, but if you anticipated it taking 45 days to do something and it turns out to take 15, those 30 days are recovered, I'm assuming, no? Or
I
is
think
that fair?
that's
Or 50
fair.
days.
But I would say, if you look at the last 3 years, if anything, our work plans have been disrupted by legislative requirements, and sometimes, by the way,
by the board itself.
By the board itself.
Sure.
That's appropriate. You're the board. It's even, I can't say it's not appropriate that the legislature's doing it, but it feels less appropriate to me that we're suddenly doing assessment reports with December 1 timelines and throw everything off that we've been working on, because there's 100 things going on. I saw Kyle before. We've got nutrition issues related to the new Obama standards that have come out. It's hard to describe on a daily basis my CEO hat, because I only try to wear my chair hat here. But it is a work plan that more often than not, we're behind because suddenly there's new stuff thrown in. We didn't even plan for that. We're planning, and I'll say this to you, if anything, we probably would have recommended a later date, but we want to make sure, we're hopeful this doesn't happen, but if, in case, someone chooses not to run again, that, we're going to have this board look at it and in January. So if anything, we feel like we've accelerated our timeline to take care of that and make sure it's, within this board. And so that, if anything, to be candid, we would have probably taken the full year, which full year being more like January or February next year. But I think we can make this work. But we really haven't left us any much leeway if we get other directives, as we seem to have gotten, much less from the board, by the way, but by the legislature. That was those couple of things. And then even, this is a little self-serving on my part, but it's not like I alone just get involved in when we're ordered to do dissolution. It shuts down whole pieces of our department to get me ready to do that and have hearings and do all the rest of that. So it's hard to describe, but that's when they come up with this. I go home, drink a Kool-Aid, and get ready for the next day. I really want to take this chance to just say I feel like I don't do this enough because it's hard. It's not really our role to burden you really with the day-to-day stuff, and the technical that typically doesn't come here because it takes care of itself to some degree, if you want to think about it that way. But it's been a big strain on our staff. We're down, I think, 11 people in the assessment area because we get stolen from all the time by the folks that are paying oodles of money in order to take some of our folks who have done such a good job. So, the good news is we're getting a lot of praise for that report. The bad news is this could get worse because our guys are developing appropriately great reputations, and they can make multiples of the salary here, as all of us could, actually, to be candid. But I'm even saying that because I might as well just say it. You're under a tremendous burden that I appreciate because you suddenly have, am I right, it's about 11? 10. So, I don't want to, and those 10 openings now, we have to work through civil service, which is a lot different than when I was at Wayne Risa, where we just hire someone. So those are just somewhat small examples, but examples of what the real life is like on a daily basis. That one I'm more worried about than any because of all the burden on us for assessments coming up, and that's about what % of our folks down there?
That is 1/3 of the assessment staff.
So, we're in a bit of a fix, and it's the nature of the game right now. With all the federal testing requirements, these companies are, jumping at the, and they're stealing people from all over the place, including us. So we're good, but thank you. I get the idea. You do need to understand that, and I take your points well taken. That we'll find that interim type stuff that we can move along and show you where we are. And that completes my report. Was that my report? Yeah. Gary.
Well, I'll spare you the details of the part where I talk about the next generation science standards.
I told you not to ask.
Okay. I want to... It was kind of a slow month since I saw you last. I feel like it was just a couple weeks ago, actually. It wasn't that long. But the last month, with the holiday break, did not have as much action as other months did, but there was still some really interesting things that went on, and I'll share those with you today. And so this is my January report. I'm getting ready to shove off to the first national conference real soon. I'll talk about that toward the end. But so right before the new year and the holiday break, I had the opportunity to visit Southlake High School in St. Clair Shores, Michigan, and I understand that they're working fairly closely with the department currently on their school improvement and district improvement plans. And so I was asked to come out and work with their science teachers and their science department, partly on next generation science standards, but partly to help them address their science instruction at their buildings. And we had a really great opportunity to work together and provide some professional development for their teachers. Similarly, I had the opportunity to fulfill a request to go to Warren Woods Tower High School. There have actually been, I think, labeled as a reward school for their progress over the last several years. And what a great bunch of teachers that they had there. I was asked to come out and work with their department, their science department as well, providing some more specific training in one area of next generation science standards, which some of our commentators had mentioned earlier, model building and model development. How do we get students building and using models to explain what it is that they're learning in science instead of just absorbing the models that are in the book or is part of their curriculum. From there, I had the opportunity to work quite a bit in the Grosse Pointe schools in my district, continue my work as an instructional coach. I worked heavily with some U.S. history teachers in the social studies department at the middle school level, which is a little bit outside of my normal domain of high school science, but it was a great opportunity to transfer the great things about teaching and learning to other subject areas. And as we educators all know, great teaching and learning is great teaching and learning regardless of the subject area or the age of the students. And this was an opportunity where we tried out project-based learning with a classroom that had not done that before. And we went through the full iterative process that project-based learning takes on, where the students generate a question to investigate an authentic situation, and using the knowledge that they're learning in their class along with some independent separate research, they go ahead and craft a novel solution to solve the problem. This class was specifically looking at the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act in conjunction with a unit where they were studying the Constitution and Constitutional Convention. And so they looked at, does what's in the Affordable Care Act align with the intentions of the Founding Fathers? And they simulated an opportunity where they provided aid to a Supreme Court justice who might be making a decision on this. And they gave really great presentations. They were multimedia in format. The kids were very engaged. They were using what they were learning. And they also had some really strong, authentic anchors for the new content that they were learning throughout the unit from their teacher. I got this surprise magazine in the mail that had my picture in it with a lengthy article, which was very nice. And so I was featured in Voice magazine for an interview that I did about my Teacher of the Year experience in the first 6 months. It was a really terrific opportunity. I got a number of text messages and tweets from colleagues around the state who said, "How come you're in my mail?" and sent me a picture of myself, which was kind of fun. One
Sign
person
and send it back.
That's right.
Sign it and send it back.
Sign it and send it back. My best comment from this is someone said, "I thought this was an advertisement for Men's Warehouse, and then I realized it was about your Teacher of the Year."
Those are your friends.
That's my friends, yeah.
Gary, what are you going to tell us what transforming exploitation into opportunity means?
I'd be happy to tell you briefly about what that means. So when I was first named Michigan Teacher of the Year, one of the first experiences I had before I think I even met any of you was that the Mackinac Center wrote a piece about how my salary was disproportionately lower than the majority of the rest of my colleagues in my district. And they went on to write this piece as in the context of it being a result of the union pay structure. But this was not something that I asked for, nor did I have a position on, nor did I know this was a thing. And so they wrote about it. They sent me the piece and said, "We'd like to offer you the opportunity to comment." And so I provided some commentary, and it got picked up by a number of other organizations, and it painted a picture of me that looked like I had a political position and agenda when I had just found out all this was going on. Sure. And so my whole thing is that I don't think that, you know, I really love the model that you all exhibit here, that we work together, we work across the table, across the aisle. And so my philosophy was to try to not look at it as there's only one way to look at this, but that there's a resolution and there's some kind of a unification somewhere in between. And so it was an opportunity for me to start sharing some things with a louder microphone than I would have normally had, and to also be able to address some of those things that were going on. This was specifically regarding Michigan House Bill 4625, which was a merit pay bill that Pete Lund introduced, I think, at the beginning of last year. And so it got me learning about policy, learning about legislation, learning about that there's more going on than the four walls of my classroom in education. But it was an opportunity for me to start learning more about education and learning what's going on at the state level and how complex and how robust the work that all of you do actually is.
Right, thanks.
Absolutely.
You're navigating it well.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. When it comes down to it, I think about this spaghetti bridge is actually one of the things that drives me in how I think about education. That I didn't come into this, and the majority of us don't come into this by force of our wallet. We come into it by force of our passion for teaching and our craft and our professionalism for teaching the content that we're teaching. And for me, project-based learning has been a strong part of science education because it's one thing to know the knowledge of science, but to be able to do something with that is a whole nother ballgame, and I think really extends and enhances student learning experiences. So I worked with a physics teacher who was interested in doing an engineering challenge, which you'll see is, this is an example of an engineering standard that would be seen in something like the Next Generation Science Standards, where students use their math calculations, their knowledge of forces to be able to build a bridge out of only spaghetti and masking tape that can support 10 times its weight. And so the students constructed their bridges in groups, brought them in and did a damage test. So they added weights until it broke to be able to measure how much weight could it hold, and then they were able to examine what areas of design in different designs worked better than others and relate that back to the physics that they were learning. I did have an opportunity to have a really great and wonderful conversation with Dr. Ziley earlier this month, where we met about the Next Generation Science Standards. And you all had a really great conversation a little while ago, so the nature of our conversation was very similar.
I don't remember those drinks glowing.
Exactly.
Exactly.
There was the intention.
You shouldn't have had 4 of them.
I couldn't get a release statement from Andiamo to use their logo in my picture, so I went with a picture of some science experiment that we did in my classroom.
All right.
But it was, the thing is that the questions you all raise are great ones. We do want to do our due diligence when we adopt new standards, and that's absolutely something that I want to be on board in working with you on doing, and I was really enjoyed the opportunity to chat and meet about that. One of the big things I've mentioned before that we're doing in Grosse Pointe right now is we're looking to get a technology bond proposal passed. It's on the ballot for February. We're looking to update our infrastructure first and foremost because most of our infrastructure is older than a number of the students in our middle schools. And so we're looking to bring things up so that we can have wireless connectivity and greater capacity for data and for students being able to connect and have connected education in our schools. And so I've had the opportunity to work closely with our district administration in promoting the technology bond to the community, presenting at libraries, Rotary Club, our senior men's and senior women's group. Tonight I'll be going to present to the League of Women Voters in Grosse Pointe. And so I've had a number of opportunities to do speaking engagements regarding our plan and our future process for implementing technology in the district, which aligns with much of the work that's going on here at the state level and at the department with regard to online assessment and some of the 21st century learning initiatives that were mentioned this morning in part of the school improvement plan. Additionally, and this is kind of close to my heart, and I can't remember if she is still here, but one of our new introductions this afternoon was a person who's working with low vision, working specifically in the area of low vision. She's not here right now. Okay. But so as I mentioned probably back in June, I'm a double cornea transplant recipient, and so I work very closely with the Michigan Eye Bank, and I'm an ambassador for sight with them, and I promote awareness of of tissue and organ donation in the state, and their organization is committed to restoring sight through tissue preservation and procurement. And so I met with them we're trying to align a group of millennials who are either cornea recipients or have been impacted in some way in their life by tissue donation to try to raise awareness among our own generation of individuals and finding ways to use social media and the latest connectivity that we have in our communications to be able to pass along and spread their message and their vision. I also got to film my first commercial, which was really cool. The Mimic Foundation asked me to work with them in promoting the work that they do in supporting the Teacher of the Year program. And so I had the opportunity to share part of my story and get some some camera time. You can find out more on their website. They have the video posted there.
Really, you're not going to play the commercial for us?
All right, I'll play the commercial for it. All right.
Yeah.
I'll hook it. I have it on. I'll bring it over in just a second. You may have heard it snowed a little bit last week here in Michigan. The coolest thing to me about the snowstorm and the cold record temperatures is that there was science going on beyond the school day for so many kids and so many families around the country. And as I was following the conversation on social media, I noticed that families all over were taking this opportunity to boil some water, take it outside, throw it up in the air, and see what happens. But it was just a neat opportunity that you would see so many people who were doing science experiments at home, looking up what was going on and the science behind it, posting their videos and chatting about it and sharing. And it was one of those authentic experiences where, in some way, what was happening in classrooms was translating to what was happening outside of classrooms. So I went outside with my wife and we measured the snowfall. We got about 15 inches, which was not the highest of all the teachers who were on Twitter. But
I always thought electricity was magic until we had 6 days without power, so.
That's right.
That was
It
a
is magic.
science experiment for us. that-
It's just when you know it was.
And then, so because it was so cold last week, I decided this is a great time to head to Arizona. So next week, I'll be headed off to Arizona to Scottsdale for the first National State Teachers of the Year conference. So I'm all registered for that. I've connected with the Maryland State Teacher of the Year and the Montana State Teacher of the Year over Twitter. So we're looking forward to meeting each other in person. And Montana has actually signed on, and we've got teachers in Montana who are participating with the Teacher Leadership Challenge that I'm moderating here in Michigan, which has been really exciting to be able to extend that education conference beyond just what's going on here in the state. And then I wanted to extend this invitation to all of you. Before we meet next in February, at Grosse Pointe North, we're going to be hosting our 4th annual cardboard boat races. This is a physics project-based learning unit where students learn about buoyancy, engineering, forces, and motion. And they have to build a boat out of cardboard and duct tape only that can support the weight of 2 students, and then they race them in the pool for a full lap there and back across the pool. It's been a great standing tradition of making education and learning into a sporting event, and it's one of the big highlights of our year. So I'd like to extend the invitation if any of you are able to make it on the afternoon of February 10th at Grosse Pointe North High School, and I'll follow that up in an email with some more specifics if you're able to join us.
Is that to participate or to observe?
It is to observe, however, if you feel compelled to participate, we can make that happen. And then finally, someone had asked me about this earlier, so I thought I would add this in there. The other thing that I did since last time I saw you is I finished the Baby Abood's room. And so we have a baby girl coming to us in March, first one. And so my wife and I pined over the colors several times and bought, got paint swatches and returned paint. And we ended up going with a taupe color and decided to do pink decorations for her rather than painting the entire room pink.
Is that paint or vinyl cutouts?
Those are fabric cutouts. Yep. I didn't know that decals existed for your room, and I found them one day in my search for how could I make this baby room the way we wanted. And anyway, it turned out really nicely. So,
Great.
I'm going to show you the commercial because you asked.
As you asked.
If it's a commercial, does state board get discounts on insurance through that?
I'm sure that they could arrange that. I'm sure they'd be happy to arrange a discount with you. But if there are any questions while I'm setting this up, I'd be happy to
Gary, you
address
mentioned
them.
in your report something about a discussion group with new teachers.
That's correct.
What-
So,
What is that?
in Grosse Pointe schools, about 3 years ago, what we started, myself and about 3 other teachers who were new that year, we started to extend our mentoring program that we were running. And let me just find this right here for you. We extended our mentoring program that we were having where we worked with veteran teachers, and we decided that it was also helpful for us to meet with each other and to meet with other newer teachers, because the mentoring process with veteran teachers was getting us some of the professional development that we sought for, but we also needed time to connect and be able to work with other teachers who we could more relate with based on our quantity of experience. So we started meeting as a group, and then the next year, we felt it was so successful to support each other that we invited the new teachers who were in that next class to come and join us, and it's been growing each year. So now we have fourth-year teachers who meet with third, second, and first-year teachers, and we meet twice monthly. We get together for breakfast, and we discuss different issues that are going on in our classrooms, and we try to connect and make sure that we're supporting each other, in addition to the mentoring program with veteran teachers that's going on in the district.
Very good.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see if this will roll.
Thought you were singing.
It's like the...
Did you plug in the,
I did. Double check.
Just play it. We just want to see you in action.
And this year I'm Michigan's Teacher of the Year. It's been a tremendous honor to be named Michigan's Teacher of the Year. It's given me the opportunity to share what successes I've had in my classroom with other teachers, and it's also given me the opportunity to advise decisions at the state level that influence all students in hundreds of classrooms around the state of Michigan. I first discovered that I wanted to be a teacher when I was working at a medical research clinic, and I realized that many of the life experiences that I had were teaching related, so my love of science and my interest in teaching drove me into education. On a daily basis, I get to connect with hundreds of young people and know that directly and indirectly the actions and interactions I have with them each day are going to shape and influence the rest of their life. Some of the qualities that make a successful teacher include that they have the ability to connect with others. The other is the ability to inspire and challenge students to reach their potential. And the final is to use instructional methods that are engaging to students to make learning come alive and to challenge them to do more than just remember things, but also to apply what they know to new situations. So it's been really wonderful to have the support of organizations like MEMIC in my own Teacher of the Year duties. This year alone, helping to be recognized for my classroom practice, but also to be recognized by the MEMIC Foundation for the ideas I have to help other classrooms has been tremendous. Their support in the way of classroom grants and programming has helped me to influence thousands of students beyond the four walls of my own classroom. And I'm just one educator who has been successful in my life. And I know that there are hundreds and thousands of educators out there who are also successful. So having the support of organizations like MEMIC to recognize even more educators will help to impact even more students and help us to all reach their potential together.
Very good. Got a future. Very nice. So you have a future
Oh, well,
beyond your
thank
day
you.
job. Yeah. Very nice.
All right, thank you very much.
And all of this was to lead up to the Cassandra Marty show. So here we go, the whole day.
Right.
Mostly Cassandra. Marty has a very short report. In fact, that the legislature is back in session. There are a number of legislative initiatives, bills left on the table at the end of last year. There's no plan, to move anything immediately. There are no committee meetings scheduled as of yet, other than tomorrow's joint House-Senate meeting on the assessment report. So the Legislative Committee met last Thursday, January 9th, where these were discussed, and also under discussion, and it was shared to a lot of the board members, was a policy on school turnaround, district and strategy, and I'll hand it over to Cassandra.
So we did meet, and one of the primary functions of the last meeting that we had was really to talk about the, it was a follow-up to a conversation that we had at the board table regarding the reform district and various options for state takeover, which can include the Education Achievement Authority, but also the possibility of additional options beyond the EAA. So the Legislative Committee discussed a statement that would help shape what these options may or may not look like and what our expectations for any entity that might be chosen as a placement would have to meet in order to qualify as an entity appropriate for this type of work. And so we had gone back and forth on a particular statement which Dan actually help to improve upon. And so what I'd like to do is actually hand out that statement. This is Dan's, correct?
Yeah, he's getting me straight.
Okay,
Have
all
to
right.
read the version.
Yes.
You can tell it's Dan that has 3 points with 4 subpoints below that.
It's Dan's because it raises more questions than it answers.
Well
played, well played.
I don't think this is Dan's, though.
Oh, really?
I think this was the original.
That's the original
that came
one?
out of the committee, so.
Okay, well.
Correct.
Okay.
So do not pay for
Pass that one. We'll start with Dan's, and then Eileen has some additional stuff.
Actually, Dan's looked at mine. I haven't looked at Dan's. But is everything in mine in yours?
It's not nearly as specific, I think, but I think it captures it. So look at it and see. I didn't have it.
One with the centered
typed to
title.
send it to you.
No, yours is right.
Right, this is.
Okay.
Yours is here.
Mine's a bunch of
All
chocolate.
right, this is Dan's, this is yours.
Dan's. I don't know if you need to pass it
Have
on.
a copy of this?
It's
Mark?
right.
I think I do,
It's on-
but I'll-
Kathleen's got it.
I'll share it.
All right, I can do my part, but I have to get that.
It is yours.
Feel free.
Okay.
The centered title
So,
is Dan's.
right, so this statement, and again, this really, the reason behind the statement is really to give the department some direction, as well as to make a request of the legislature that the department really have the authority to develop criteria in which to determine who would be the most appropriate entity for any given school that we might be looking at, particularly for a restart scenario. So the statement reads, "The State Board of Education supports an effective turnaround strategy for chronically underperforming schools. Schools classified as chronically underperforming should be placed into the state reform school district under the control of the Michigan Department of Education, who should be required to place the school under the management of an entity, including itself, with a verifiable track record of educational success, preferably in school turnaround efforts. The State Board of Education calls for legislation that requires the MDE first to establish clear performance standards that would have to be met by an entity before it would be eligible to manage a school that has been placed into the state school reform district, and two, define the process by which schools are placed in and removed from the state school reform district. Finally, the State Board of Education recognizes that results require resources and calls on the state legislature to appropriate adequate funding for school improvement activities." So I think it would be appropriate for a motion to accept and a second, and then we can discuss.
I move.
Moved by John.
Support.
Supported
Somebody
by
else did first.
Eileen.
Kathleen did first.
Discussion, John?
The purpose of all of this, I think we share, and that's as we ask the legislature to enable options, non-EAA options for who could effectively turn around chronically underperforming schools, we would very much like to have the clear criteria that the department can define further, but have clear criteria over who will be well-equipped or well-qualified to turn around effectively underperforming schools, so that we don't have schools being assigned to those we know have a bad record of turnaround efforts, or those who don't have a likelihood of success, if they don't have the expertise, resources, ability. So, Dan, I would just, I very much agree with the statement. I think one of the points that Eileen and others raised, which I know you agree with, was we want to have quality control on who can operate turnaround efforts. That could be guaranteed by either they have a history of effectiveness at school turnaround, but we don't want to preclude new entrants, whether it's a university or a nonprofit or another entity that has never done that before but has a likelihood of success because they're credible, they have expertise, they have educational assets. So if anyone's worried about this statement at the end of the first paragraph to say, with a verifiable track record of educational success, if that appears to box out any new entrants, I would encourage us to add, or demonstrable likelihood of success, at managing school turnaround efforts. That would be my elaboration, that it's an either or. Either you've got a good record, you've turned around schools, which is in point to prevent people that have tried to run schools and don't educate kids from doing more, or you have a strong likelihood of success, but it would be this department and the superintendent who would further define the criteria that we would also, I'm sure, review and agree are good criteria. So that would be my one recommendation, and just on the main point of this effort, which is asking the legislature to put this power in place.
Would you say this will come after with a verifiable track record of educational success or?
Comma, or demonstrable likelihood of success, comma, at managing school turnaround efforts, scratch preferably in, which opens the opportunity, if they're credible and have a chance, a good chance, as determined by some criteria further developed, doesn't have to be developed in legislation. That would be my one encouragement.
I agree, just for the record.
Dan agreed. Cassandra?
I just have, maybe it's more of a question than a request, but my understanding is if a school is in the bottom 5%, then the reform office determines whether it goes into the reform office itself, correct? Or does it automatically go under the purview of the?
It's under the purview from day one.
Okay.
But whether or not it goes into a state reform district is the very few that would end up there.
Okay, then I think we need to, okay, so it's the reform district that's the key word
Key
here.
is the district that you have.
Okay, because my question was, this seems to imply that everything that goes in automatically has to have an educational entity oversee it, and that's not my understanding, right?
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Good, so we don't make all the
Okay,
words.
so then, all right, so here's my recommendation. Schools classified as chronically underperforming should be placed into, could that be may be placed into the state school reform district?
Should be.
Sure, so maybe placed into the state school reform district by the state school reform office at the
Yes.
MDE?
Right. Because we're not,
That's consistent with what you guys are doing, right? You may place it into the district if it's under the purview of the office. Is that right, Mike?
Yes. Yeah. The only ones eligible would be the ones that are in the state reform office, and that's based on the so-called bottom 5%.
yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get is, you're not going to be a pass-through. So it's not going to be, oh, you come to us, we're going to throw you over here. We're going to decide what's best, and it might be you go into these other. So I just want to make sure that we're not like mandating one specific action when that's not appropriate for everyone.
I mean, the beauty of this, similar to some of the reservations we had as a team, as an MDE team in December, was not only do we need more options, but in addition to need more options, there are some that might be tailored better to fit the needs of a given school.
Right.
That one could then make a thoughtful decision about. For example, maybe it's a nearby district that has a track record with a similar kind of school that's made great progress, and that district would be willing to, for some period of time, take over, for lack of a better word, but, supervise that. And that would be, from my point of view, that would be an example of an ideal solution to this, so that you're not really losing if anything, it's learning from colleagues. In theory, this could be a school that's 2 blocks away, but on the other side of a border, that the district's had some success, and for some period of time, that's an entity that actually could demonstrate right out of the block success, but if not, would have a track record, or rather a likelihood, to John's language. And each one, I think, would be more surgical. It would be thinking about what would fit their needs best. So there may be universities in the mix at some point if they chose to step up.
So, just following on then, so if we could change the word should to may in the second sentence, and then put a period after MDE, parenthesis, and then if the department, if the reform office determines that a restart model is most appropriate, then they should be required to place the school under the management. Does that make sense?
That's right? That language makes sense, right? Deb?
Current law states that once these the low-performing schools are placed under the supervision of the school reform office, they operate that way until they demonstrate lack of satisfactory progress. And it's once they demonstrate lack of satisfactory progress is when they can be placed in the state school reform redesign district, or they are unable to produce an approvable plan. And then that's when some of these options kick in, what is the next level of accountability for those schools?
But are you saying that every one of those schools in that scenario will automatically become a restart?
No, what I'm saying is that only if they do not make satisfactory progress.
So the answer was yes,
Then
that the restart language makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although I'm wondering if we should stay broader than that. Just, I mean,
I'm
that
with
law
Dan.
may change.
I'm with you on this.
Yeah. And I'm not tweaking, I don't have your language, I didn't get it all written down to change it, but something like schools under the purview of the State School Reform Office may be placed into the State School Reform District under the control of the MDE. Without referring to restart, just may, like, depending
Yep,
on whatever
no,
the
that's
criteria
what I
are that
have.
ultimately happen
Right.
in law. Who should be required to, I mean, so I think it may be just as simple as changing should to may.
Well, no, it's
And
also the
no?
required piece.
So
I'm
we got-
saying it's not always going to be the case where they're going to want to take that school then and automatically place them under the purview of someone else. So we shouldn't use a word that forces that hand.
Well, including itself.
Even so,
So may be placed into the district. Once it's placed into the district, somebody's going to run the school, whether it's the State School Reform Office or some other operator.
I thought you,
Basically, it said, once they're placed in
Or
the
under
district,
this
then you
control or
can choose
supervision
another
of-
model, and one of those models could be the restart
yeah,
model.
but so.
But there's
Oh,
also
you're saying
other
you want-
things you
okay,
can
got
do.
It's in
it.
law already,
Why
so.
don't you just use double may? The may up here and may under the
That's
second two
fine
should
with
be
me.
required.
Sure.
And I think, if I may just say so, do you really want to say the State Reform Office? That doesn't have to be here.
Right. And I'm worried
Oh, I
about,
see.
I'm worried about the ambiguity. I mean, if I read this as an outsider, I would say, you know what, this is not a big deal. We're not going to put it there, we're going to put it right into the EAA. So, and I know there are restrictions on doing that, but I don't want to get so, I want to be strong in this and say it should be coming to the department for determination.
Yeah. And I think preserving the department's role, because the
Already.
office doesn't have to be in the department. The office could be a treasurer.
I can't hear you, Mike.
The office doesn't have to be in the department.
Oh,
I mean, that was, candidly, one of the reasons I think it is good, watching John today interact with Craig as an example, I think it is good to keep positive relations with the governor's office, including what I do and we do, is because
but I
that
think
was a
she's saying
discretionary
this one should
call.
still
I mean,
be
it makes the
should.
most sense in the world to us to be in the
Yeah.
department, but it doesn't have to be in the department.
Don't we?
I was
like-
wondering if we could put in what Mike said, that there should be options for, use the word options, that it's not just one option now is the EAA.
Right. That's the spirit.
Well, this is all about
And we,
criteria for other
That's the
options.
legislation that's going to be considered. So we should be, I don't know if we should mention EAA, but we should mention options, I think. In order to be effective, we have to have options.
Well, I really think by saying in the second sentence, schools classified as chronically underperforming may be placed into the State School Reform District under the control of the Michigan Department of Education, MDE. That keeps the control, right? And then may be placed, they may place the school under the management of an entity. The options are incorporated. Is that what you were? The
Yeah,
options-
I think what Eileen might be saying, and she, is that first should stay there, because that.
Actually, what I'm saying is schools classified as chronically underperforming should be placed under the control of the Michigan Department of Education.
That's what I just said,
I'm
yeah.
sorry,
That's
the
okay.
one downside of having you be over there is if I can't read your lips, if you're facing
Yeah.
away, I'm in
So take
trouble,
away
so-
that may and keep it should.
Should. And then, to me, the department would be the entity that would then decide still whether or not things went into the EAA, whether it stayed within the department, or whether there was another provider that could, is that, Mike, you're nodding your head, but this
Right.
has to be something that works for the department.
Yes, that I think we would need those options, and I think there are options that would be better for given schools than others, and we would, I get the point about trying to be thoughtful about how that would happen. But if we had, this was the whole dilemma we had when we ran into December and didn't have any options, is there's some, I'm repeating myself, but if we were to be given options that included other school districts, sometimes that would be the best option, because that school district already has a school very similar that they've had success with. So for some period of time, they help manage another school that's nearby, and then in time, it goes back to the traditional district. And that, to me, would be, this would not exclude any of those. This is looking for more options.
Can I make a recommendation
Sure.
that might get us where? So, back to Eileen's point, keep the first should. But the second after that said under the control of the Michigan Department of Education, MDE, period. Or, I'm sorry, comma, who may place the school under the management of an external or whatever entity, including itself, period. Such options should include a verifiable track record. We can
Such
wordsmith.
entities should have
Right.
a verifiable track record
Yeah.
of educational
Or-
success or demonstrable likelihood of success to managing school turnaround effort.
And then the only other question would be, do you wish to do a list of, going back to where Cassandra put the period, under the control of the Michigan Department of Education, comma, who I would say would be required to place the school under the management of an entity, under MDE, comma, the EAA, comma, or another provider of MDE's choice. I don't want
But
to. Do we gain anything by specifying that, or is it better just to? Because I don't see that you get here. I don't see for sure that we're explicit that you would be the one choosing whether something would go into the EAA.
I see.
But then we're naming entities.
I know.
But also, I mean, in an original version, I mean, the guts of this are in the second paragraph, actually, which is, we want authority here that legislatively is enabled to set clear criteria for who's going to do a good job managing turnaround. That should also be the criteria by which more decisions about schools being placed in an EAA or anywhere else are made. And good criteria that says, you've got a good record of success or you have a likelihood of success in the future would govern decisions about whether the EA gets more as well as whether Wayne's Intermediate School District gets one or a charter network gets one. So I would prefer, going back to Dan's original encouragement, which why he's the author of this first draft, to not name all the entities, but make it clear what we care about is quality criteria on who gets to do the job. And you can either earn success to do more, or you can have a strong chance of doing it already.
I
just
so
wanted-
that- I agree
wanted to
with you on
suggest
that.
a way to get the word options in there is maybe in that last sentence, it would say something like any entity MDE opts to use. That way, it makes it clear that it's at MDE's option on which to use, and you don't have to actually name any of the entities, but make it clear that that you have, make opt a verb instead of a noun, and to show that you have some
Have
choices.
a record of success or demonstrable
Right.
likelihood, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and
Right.
that would get the concept in of options.
All right, so I'm still looking at this not as us, but as the legislature with clear direction to them. I would say the second sentence should be, all schools classified as chronically underperforming should be placed under the control of the Michigan Department of Education, who will select a reform provider for the school. And then the only question is whether it is including, you could say, comma, including the Department of Education, comma, the EAA, comma, or another provider at MDE's, what's the right word? Discretion.
But now we're mandating.
No, that's all the choices that there are contemplated. But what we are saying is that we have that right. What this sentence is trying to do is to say, give them to the department.
And then have them automatically send them out to somewhere else? Because I think it's
Keep
only
it-
if they
keep
choose
them
the
themselves.
restart model.
No, I said keep it ourselves.
Right.
The EAA, which exists,
Mhm.
or another provider at the department's discretion.
But
Can I just make a quick suggestion, just around, as we words, just process-wise? Just for the moment, strike the first paragraph. We don't even pay any attention to it. Like, the second paragraph is the meat of this. So let's wordsmith the second paragraph, which is what we're actually calling for, as opposed to our more generalized statement. Get that, what we're calling for, right, and then we can always go back and write a sentence that tries to summarize all of that at the top.
Or we could simply strike everything but the State Board of Education supports an effective turnaround strategy for chronically underperforming schools, and then go right down to, we call
Sure.
on the legislature.
Yes. but I think it's the call that matters here. And
I
one change
agree.
clearly to the call is on number 2, so it's not removal from the state school reform district that is actually at issue here. It's actually removal from
Yes.
third-party management.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Yes.
Maybe it's both, but I don't, I'm looking at department folks. So what comes into the state school reform district? Well, the distinction between the office and the district notwithstanding here, I don't know, so maybe you guys can offer some clarification on that second part?
Do you have a thought?
Would be placed in a...
Vanessa?
I do think it's important to remember in this discussion that the current setup is once they're named persistently low achieving as the language in legislation right now, they come under Deb's direction as the state school reform officer, and they're there for 3 years of implementation. That's outlined in our flex waiver. At that point, if they have not made the legislative language's satisfactory progress, so I would encourage us to not maybe introduce another chronically underperforming, that then what does that mean when we've at least had this satisfactory progress thing out there in legislation, but that's your call. I'm just pointing that out as a piece in legislation. If they've not made satisfactory progress, they're eligible, not mandated, it's not mandated, but they're eligible for placement into the statewide school reform and redesign district. So that's how the process is laid out now. Just keeping in mind that if what you're talking about is what governs who goes in to that transition, or who can take them, who the district
Right.
can be
And
run
that's-
by. Focusing in on that really carefully will help, because I think the office and the district, keeping them separate gives us that time for them to hopefully turn around before this higher
Right.
level of accountability.
Right.
And unless we are asking the legislature to change all the laws right now, the department's already getting the schools. Then they go into a formal status of a school reform district. It's within that reality that we want to define the nature of good options. I very much think we have to keep the language at the front, which we just defined, that says we want then those entities may be placed, those schools may be placed in entities that have either a good track record of performance or demonstrable likelihood. And then the second paragraph is just clearly saying what the nature of legislation that we are calling for to implement that statement, which is the right understanding. And I would not want to mention the EAA except to say the EAA is governed by this criteria that we are setting to determine whether it is qualified under the criteria to continue to accept more schools or what. So, because I'm nervous about if we're including what Eileen's suggesting, we're basically fuzzying the point of this is about all options, clear criteria for quality, whether it's EAA or anybody else.
So I would only say that if you're confident that this law will not supersede prior law, then we are working with the existing structure, and there is no need to mention it. If we're confident that that's the case, I don't know, you're confident that this is not going to rewrite the existing
Well,
law.
any
That's what we're
new
trying
law
to do.
takes precedence over old law.
It would replace the EAA, for example.
Yeah, but we're trying
What
to
did
get
you
more
say, Dan?
options to.
Well, the current legislation says that once a school is placed in the district, then the school reform officer can impose one of those 4 intervention models, and one of those are the restart models. That already exists.
No, but but that transfer agreement, does it mean if they take the restart, it automatically goes into the EAA? Is that what would be considered?
None of that. It just says that you can impose one of those models, you adjust the collective bargaining agreements and all that kind of thing. All the transfer agreement did was what we tried to do was set up a structure where you had an entity run the district.
But that's what we're
So-
saying, we want other
You're saying
options.
we're gonna run the district.
We want other options for running the
Right.
district, that's,
Right.
running the school,
That was
rather.
just an option to run the district.
So
Not
in,
run the district, run the
So
school.
will it
In
supersede the
paragraph-
transfer agreement then?
See, if what
Yes.
we'd be moving to with options is that it would be more school-oriented, with individual thinking about where would that appropriate placement of a school be, rather than automatically that district is run by the EAA. That's
Sure.
what we would move from, the district not automatically being run by the EAA,
Got it,
but
okay.
we would select which of the options folks would go into based on their needs of a multiple number of options.
So these are
So-
options for non-EAA placed
So in the second paragraph, it sounds like number 1, sub 1, what we would ask for in the legislation, everyone's okay with. Sub 2, I'm pausing a little bit just to make sure. Sub 2, define the process by which schools are placed in and removed from. It's not the reform district that we need clarification about removal from. It's an imposed third-party management, right? Under the restart model. So can we tweak that language so are placed in and removed from third-party management? Is that the right way to say that?
Well, technically, the
Or-
school is still in the
Sure.
district until the school, whatever option is used, the third-party manager is working, basically working for the district, operating the school.
They're
The current law
contracting it.
says that the school,
Has to
the school
oversee
is
it.
put into the district, and the district then would contract or whatever with an outside entity to run it. So actually, the language as is correct. Because it would be, how does the school get out of the district?
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Oh, should we say it return to its local district? Instead of
I like
remove?
that.
yes, that makes more, that's much clearer, I think. Yeah.
What?
Is,
Yeah,
Placed in the
return to.
reform
is
district
the
and
schools are
return-
returned to
Return to the
their local district.
I don't know. It's not a political issue, there's a legal distinction between the two. Maybe we want all three. Define the process where schools are placed in, to the state school reform district, removed from the state school reform district, and returned to their original district. But there's a distinction between the two.
Well, what else is
So
going
you're
to
saying
What's
removed,
the decision?
unless you want
If
to.
they're making satisfactory progress, we will make that call to return them to the district. We already have the authority to do that.
So even if they're under the purview of a third-party entity? Yeah, no, that's,
In the SRO, I'm sorry. In the
I'm
SRO.
saying even before you go into the district.
There's,
right.
The authority of the state reform office and placed in the district, and those are two distinct things.
So after 3 years, we can release them out of the SRO and never make a decision that they would go to the district.
What we're asking, though, about is, once they go into a third party, then how do they get back out?
That's not specified, you're right about that.
That's what we need.
Yeah, and I think that's your number 2, right? Define the process by which schools are placed in and removed from.
Well,
which
I
we-
wonder.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, there's-
It's not actually, not all, I don't know that we're worried about
Removed
the
from-
process for removal of all schools from the district. It's only the schools under third-party management that I think we're seeking clarification
Correct.
in the form of, like, we want the legislature to authorize the department to make clear how those schools are removed from the district. So if a school has chosen, or one of the other turnaround strategies has been imposed by the office on a school in the district, I don't think we're as concerned, I don't think there's any lack of clarity about what happens to that school over time. The lack of clarity exists around what happens to the school that is in the district, under the control of the office, for whom the restart's been selected and is under third-party management.
So why don't we say the process by which schools are placed in and removed from educational entities to which they are assigned by the school reform district or the school reform officer?
You can't say
Something like that.
how they're removed from or returned to the district?
You can do both. I'm just arguing that
less
the
wordy.
two are distinct, and I would just argue, so you might come out of third-party management and stay in the school reform district. Like, I could see that potentially happening, right? Like, hey, so Deb says, you know what? This strategy of having the ISD operate it isn't working.
Right.
We're taking it.
We're going to try a different transformation strategy, but it's going to stay, it's still in the bottom 5%, if you will. It's going to stay in the school reform district.
So
So
removed
it's not
from the
going back
district,
to its home
returned to the
district.
district, or any change made?
Or ultimately
status.
return to their,
Well, that's the,
Local
then why don't we just
district.
put that as the last
There's a lot of
part?
people who are fearful that
they're never getting their
they were
schools
never going to
back.
get returned
Sure,
to the district.
I have
And
no
they're-
issue
and
with that.
That's the plan all along.
Add that to it, but I think it's a mistake to conflate removal from the school reform district, or removal from third-party management with returning to the original district.
I think
Like,
I think I understand.
All right, so let me, can we try?
To those four ways of turning a school around, do we want to stick with that? Or do we want to say that that's not the best
Legislated.
idea? If
I
we're
wish we could
proposing
change it.
changes.
Aren't we
it's
forced
turnaround.
to under the federal?
Is that the
Yeah,
best
under
way?
the feds.
We're stuck with those.
Stuck with
It's
Yeah.
that race to the top stuff, which is,
But
the-
we didn't get race to the top, so we don't have to stick with it.
they passed
Can we
legislation
can we
to.
run through this and see if we can
We're
call
talking
the
about changing
question?
legislation. So do we want to change that?
Are you skipping the
part
first
of the
Yeah, make a
legislation?
recommendation.
Good
I'm
point.
I
not-
think Eileen's point has been, to the degree we minimize the change but can make what we want happen, the better we're, or the more likely we are to get it. So that's why, I mean, in a way, the
We're
four,
Sticking with the four.
We will take
To
that
me-
up
to me,
at
and I-
Set up an appointment statement. Can we just-
legislative committee.
can I just say, I mean, two things, I'm just talking about my role for a minute, but I've been saying for quite a while now, is that, number one, other options, and number two, how you get out. And by out, I mean, there is a distinction, so it's not getting out, to your point, it's getting back to your school district eventually. We should have, as I think you said, Dan, the option inherent in here that it might not be working in entity X. We assigned it on, in effect, a temporary basis to see if they're getting progress. If they're not, they go back to the school reform district, and another entity may be assigned.
Or you may choose a different strategy. You may, instead of restart, you may
Right.
choose.
Right.
You know, I mean, so there's a difference between
There is,
those
and that's
two.
also a good way to keep accountable these entities, including EAA, local districts, whatever, as they're involved, that are you actually turning it around? But ultimately, we would appreciate you calling for definition on how to go back to the district. And if that's for us, if you're saying we're calling for allowing the department to determine that, which I think you were saying, just, it's giving us together the authority to figure out how they go back. I mean, they may choose as a legislature to say, we're going to define how they go back, but there's no reason we shouldn't pitch that we're the logical ones to do that.
I actually think we're about there, I hope. So can I run through what I would recommend? The State Board of Education supports an effective turnaround strategy for chronically underperforming schools. Schools classified as chronically underperforming should be placed into the State School Reform District under the control of Michigan Department of Education, which we want to see remain, comma, who may place the school under the management of an entity, including itself, period. Such entities should have a verifiable track record of educational success or demonstrable likelihood of success at managing school turnaround efforts. Therefore, the State Board of Education calls for legislation that requires the MDA, 1, establish clear performance standards that would have to be met by any entity before it would be eligible to manage a school that's been placed into the State School Reform District, and 2, define the process by which schools are placed in and removed from the State Reform District, by the process by which schools are placed in and removed from educational entities to which they have been assigned by the State School Reform District, and how schools are ultimately returned to their home districts.
One thing.
Mhm.
We heard that chronically underperforming is a new term, and we should probably stick with the term that's already being used, so I would change that.
What is the term that's being used?
Persistent.
They
Persistent.
failed to make, well, it's,
Oh, yeah.
for the decision of the district, it is who have failed to make satisfactory progress while under the supervision of the SRO, would be my recommended.
So
Sufficiently low
schools
achieving, is that
who
what you're
have
saying?
failed.
Consistently lowest achieving is how they get identified as being under the
Right.
purview of the state reform officer.
To
And
make
then if they,
adequate
from
progress.
there, if they fail to make satisfactory progress while under her
Satisfactory progress.
jurisdiction, they can be placed in the statewide reform redesign district.
There you go.
Well, I have
So-
another question, John.
Schools
Do
have
we
been-
want to say that they should be placed into the State School Reform District, or under to the State Reform Office?
Well, I think what we're saying is,
Because
under
the
current
office
law,
can then
they
decide
are
whether they
placed.
go in the district.
I think we want to
Already
say
under
two
the
things.
office.
They're already under the office.
In the
So under
current
current
law.
law, they go into the office automatically. And what we want to deal with is the question of which of those go into the district, and then which of the ones in the district, what the process is by which they are assigned third-party
But the-
management.
The department, the office should be deciding, not we're saying automatically they're going to be placed into the district?
No.
No.
That's what it says
They,
here.
so
No, that's not in the revised version.
what happens is,
That's what John just read.
Right.
so what happens is, if they're in the bottom 5%, they automatically go into the office. and they have 3 years to make progress. And we're saying after the 3 years, if they haven't made satisfactory progress, then they go into
Why
the
do we say
district.
that? If you don't know that, I mean, this is not clear.
That's what we're saying.
That's what we are saying
It's
now.
we're, I believe, by
Why don't
policy
you read
valid,
it?
what we are affirming by policy, we actually believe it is a good thing that schools who have failed to make adequate progress as defined by whatever should be.
After 3 years.
After 3 years, should be placed into the state school reform district under the control of Michigan
Oh, okay,
Department of
that's-
Education.
That's changed from what you read. That's what
That's-
you're saying. Okay.
That's what I'm just adding.
Okay, that makes
So-
more sense.
So if that sounds good, so otherwise, are we,
The one other tweak to your language, so in the, I'm sorry,
That's all right.
Richard, you're waiting, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. We, as the board, don't have the authority to require the MDE to establish clear performance standards that would have to be met by any entity before it would be eligible to manage a school that has been placed into the state school reform district.
right, that's why we're saying, therefore, the State Board of Education calls for legislation.
Okay.
That requires the MDE.
Oh, wait,
So
are you
we don't-
suggesting that we already have that authority?
Well, I'm asking, don't we?
Do we?
Do
We should. We
I think we do.
supervise, provide general
But I-
supervision to education. We hire and fire the state superintendent who supervises the staff.
Yeah, I-
And why are we asking the legislators to do this, do our job for us?
The only thing we need really are the two things I mentioned. We need options, that there's clarity about options beyond the one we have now,
Still not
and that we
clear.
need a way that districts can receive their schools back. Those would be the two big wins we would want, because we could do the rest of this. And, as I said earlier, we certainly feel the burden, if that's the right word, that when schools are named, we would need to be able to demonstrate why. So, I mean,
But there is a different version of the legislation they could pass, which is what we're trying to influence and encourage a better version of. That version could be, and versions that emerged before the break would allow this. We passed legislation that asks any schools that are in the, turnaround district may be placed with any and all other educational entities, including charter school operators with bad track records. I mean, they won't say that, but we're basically saying, no, we want the legislature to empower and ask and demand specific criteria that we set, that Mike sets over here, that is about how you guarantee quality. They could pass legislation
So that they
allowing
don't-
any and all of these schools that need turnaround to go anywhere. And that's what we want to not have happen, because it will not necessarily ensure that the kids learn as we must.
I see. Yeah, this would, if they were to agree to this would assure that the quality
Control
would
is
be
in
back
place,
here.
and in place over here where we can do it thoughtfully, and asking us to do that.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's real important.
So then one other quick change that I was going to suggest is under sub 2 in the second paragraph. I didn't have exactly your language, but I think you just need to add the word management of. You were describing those third-party entities, and it was like, define the process by which schools are placed in this and removed from.
Educational entities.
The
Maybe the
management
management of educational entities.
From the management of.
That is such a confusing
I don't like
sentence.
management of it. It applies private companies. I don't like it.
Oversight?
Oh, it could be an ISD, it could be the neighboring traditional district, like I don't.
What if we did oversight instead of
The
management?
auspices are under the,
They are being managed.
Say that sentence one more time for me. I'm trying to.
The last sentence, okay, let me try.
Whatever the word
Again,
is in
Ms.
sub
Maryland.
2, it should use the same word
got
in
most
sub
of it
1.
down.
Right now it's managed, so let's just use the same
Right,
word.
to manage, we're saying in sub 1, to manage a school, so I agree with Dan, define the process by which schools are placed in and removed from the management of educational entities to which they are assigned by the school, whatever, reform
State school
district
reform
office,
district.
or officer, whichever is appropriate, and how they are ultimately returned to their home district.
Can you just say that by which schools are placed with a reform entity and returned to their district, to their home district?
Is that miss anything?
Is there any option besides being returned to their home district?
Yes, it would just go back to,
The one we just discussed. It could go
Okay.
back to Deb's purview, and she could
Okay.
assign them
So
to
it has
another
to be,
entity.
it has to be returned and removed, or it has to be placed and removed then? Okay. Okay.
To return to the district or changed to another
Is there any way
reform.
of
To another
getting this
option.
typed up
To
so we
another
can see
option.
it?
Yeah, it just seems like, you're the editor. You just-
Well, we just went through it and read it. I don't think with too much
It's just,
confusion.
well, the
Marilyn, you're
sentence
getting-
seems very
She's
confusing
got it,
to me.
so do you want to, we can read it back one more time, but I really think we should approve it with license to wordsmith it the last. I don't think we're making
And
it.
make sure it's what the
Okay.
department needs.
Right. Is this what the department needs?
He's not sure.
Have it, Yes.
If you understand what I mean.
Okay.
Gets at the two main issues we've been concerned
All right, so motion's been made and seconded with a lot of specific change.
Quite a few.
Yeah.
It'd be much better to be able to read the thing.
So read it one more time out loud for us, John.
Yeah, the whole thing.
All right, Marilyn, do you think you have it, or do you want me to do it again, or try to?
I don't care. You can do it, I can do it. What do you want
Why
to
don't
do?
you do it if you think you have it?
The State Board of Education supports an effective turnaround strategy for chronically underperforming schools. Schools who have failed to make satisfactory progress after 3 years should be placed into the State School Reform District under the control of the Michigan Department of Education.
Who may?
May place the school under the management of an entity including itself, period. Such entities should have a verifiable track record of educational success or demonstrable likelihood of success at managing school turnaround efforts. Next paragraph. Therefore, the State Board of Education calls for legislation that requires the MDE to, 1, establish clear performance standards that would have to be met by any entity before it would be eligible to manage a school that has been placed into the State School Reform District, and 2, define the process by which schools are placed in and removed from the management of educational entities to which they are assigned by the State School Reform Office, and how schools are ultimately returned to their original district. Finally, the State Board of Education recognizes that results require resources and calls on the state legislature to appropriate adequate funding for school improvement activities.
Bravo.
This is why we love
Very
her.
well done, Marilyn.
Joseph, did your finger go up?
Yes, there's one phrase in there that I caught that I think may be problematic for everyone, and that is after calling for the legislature to require MDE to define criteria, then it says also calls for the legislature to define the process by which they are put in.
No.
It did say that.
Calls for the legislature to require the MDE to 1 and 2.
To do 1 and 2.
Maybe that needs to be clear.
It's requiring MDE to 1 and 2.
Right, so I think number 2, there's an issue with number 2 that I
Read
think.
number 2, Madam. All it has to say is require, that the department will.
Read number 2 as you have it.
Well, the lead-in sentence is, the State Board of Education calls for legislation that requires the MDE to do these 2 things. The second thing is, define the process by which schools are placed in and removed from the management of educational entities to which they are assigned by the State School Reform Office, and how schools are ultimately returned to their original district.
It's not the legislature. Because you don't have it in front of you, but it's MDE and then 1 or 2.
So there's just a couple of word edits. School, it's not schools who, it's schools which, or schools that.
I wrote down which.
Good. And then there was one other thing in the last sentence in the first paragraph that didn't quite match, and I didn't write it down, I'm sorry. My brain is fried.
Such entities must have a verifiable track record of educational success or
No, it's another thing, it's like, it's a matchup of a subject and a verb.
You said the last paragraph?
No, it's the last sentence here. It's like this, it was like the
Sunset.
schools.
Schools that have not made satisfactory, schools that have, not who have, right?
Okay.
It's the same thing.
Is it a problem with that chronically underperforming? You had mentioned that. Should that say?
We changed it. We
Oh,
changed it.
up
It's
here,
there to make
up here.
adequate progress per the law.
Well, no, but the chronically underperforming is still there, because I thought it was persistently low achieving. But someone brought up the issue that chronically underperforming might raise a question of what is that?
I think that first
In
sentence.
the first sentence, it's okay, because it's this concept of they're persistently low achieving, and then they don't change, they're chronically underperforming. And then Marilyn's change.
I don't care what you call
The second sentence gets us to the alignment with have failed to make satisfactory progress. But I did raise it as a concern, but the first one, I think it's
Okay.
Okay?
Can we,
Another question?
roll with amendments?
It was moved by John, it was supported by, let me remember, Eileen.
Does it mention options anyplace?
No, it doesn't say options, and it doesn't make note of, I don't think it makes note of the, what is that, restart model, does it? So,
Restart's not necessary, but
So-
you could add
because if
options.
you may do it.
It inferred it
It's
with.
part of the may.
It's all about options. I mean, that's what it is about.
Okay. Are we putting
Do we call
EAA in
the
there or
You
not
think it's
putting
clear?
EAA?
No.
Okay. Okay.
No names.
Call the question, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed,
Yes, aye.
same? Okay, great. Thank you. Excellent.
Can we quickly, while we have action items under discussion, Marilyn, can we bring back the school finance outcomes?
Let's see if I can get the right copy.
So I would welcome for engaging this process with the timeline towards November of 2014.
Some order? I'm gonna get up.
All I did is, every place it said something about school finance. It tries to talk about the interrelationships of school finance and organizational policy and student achievement and student outcomes. and student, It's basically trying to just hurt Greg's good comment to say everything we do in soliciting input will look at the interrelated effects of school finance and organization and achievement. So if you're willing to trust me on that, and we can fix it up too if there's typos. Right. But can I have a motion to support with the license to fix the typos? But
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Dan, supported
More than typos.
by Lupe.
They're asking.
Yeah, they got a couple,
Moved by
you know,
Dan.
they got student twice.
Okay. so it's
Yeah,
just
we're gonna
typos.
fix that.
Just,
Okay.
So it was moved by Dan, supported by Lupe. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same? Thank you. I think we're, let's see, are we? Any further comments by board? Okay.
I'm sorry. I had a question.
Don't apologize.
Okay. This came from Marcy, what's it? I was even, she had voiced some concern about some changes in special ed regulations, and I had asked to get from her sort of a list of what that might be, which I did not get. But I wanted to bring up that there is some concern from folks in the community around special ed that are saying that there's some changes that may be gutting parental rights and certain rules around special education, that they were made to the SEAC and therefore were not brought for public comment because it was allowed to go. So is it true that the changes will not come for public comment, or?
It's the process of updating the special ed administrative rules, and so part of that has been the development. There's a whole rules process that goes with you guys as well. We know that these aren't private right now necessarily, but we know that Ms. Lipsick got a copy and forwarded them to OSAP, the Office of Special Education Program.
Okay.
We're in the midst of a whole process that will involve comment.
Public
So
comment, like here, or?
The rules process, yeah. It's a rule-making process. It also, there's interaction with the board around that, too.
Okay, so where we would vote on it?
Rick, help me on the rules process with the board.
Do we vote on those?
Carol, I'm not really directly involved in the rules process. I provide updates to the board, like, as it goes through the process, probably like 5 times through the course of the rules, but,
I just would like to flesh it out a little bit more.
Yeah,
I
let's-
mean, I don't have enough information to really.
Let's say this, even if
voices a
you don't
concern.
vote on it, we will bring to you what we're proposing. or
So the changes would be made without board approval. Would that happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, rules don't require board approval, but I'm saying we would bring it to the board to see if there's concerns. that we have.
Before it was adopted.
Presentation on it would be helpful.
Yeah,
That's right.
maybe that would be useful, exactly what the changes are.
That's what I thought I just said, but
Oh,
I'm,
you did? Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
I'm saying we'd be happy to, I'm just saying the law doesn't require the board to approve rules. However, if that's of interest to the board, we'll bring it to you before we implement rules and get your
Okay.
sense of that,
Okay,
right?
that would be good, yeah.
Okay.
And either, as Kathy says, form of presentation, but somehow here at the board table.
Great,
or-
thank you.
Or might even be that we would show you in our mid-month what we have in mind, and if there's concerns, then we would bring it to the board table. Maybe that's the one. There may not be.
I also had another question. I've heard a couple of reports. I know there was a newsletter from Middle Cities that went out about it, and in, my husband's district, about being approached around issues of the EAA. And I know I shared with you that there was a posting in River Rouge for an EAA principal position at the high school, which has now been taken down. It's creating, there's a lot of tension in a lot of these districts, and something like that just, it creates a lot of havoc. And when, my understanding is there are people that are approaching some of the schools about converting to EAA, or coming into EAA. And I'm not sure if the department is aware of that, or anyone in the department is aware of that, but there has been some attention brought to it, and some talk around it in the community that there is discussion outside of sort of this mandate that we're talking about. And I don't know if the department has, I'm assuming not, but I would like to ask, is there anybody in the department that has been meeting with school districts about the possibility of them either voluntarily coming into the EAA or some other way of expanding EAA besides being placed by
Not that I'm aware of. Anyone here have any sense of, there's a lot of I've been answering a lot of rumor questions. No, the last 2 months, I'm doing nothing but answering rumor questions. And rumors are rumors, the internet.
The LEAs can?
But no, we're not involved in that at all, and I don't know what Middle Cities might have been saying. If anything, I met with
There's a
them.
release that went out that said it's been reported that school districts have been approached. Now, I don't know by who.
They're not saying MDE's involvement.
No, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
So, and I know there's a lot of rumors, but I'm telling you, it creates such havoc in these communities.
I'm sure, but I don't know what to do. But I had someone, I'm ready to do a Dansville visit next week, I think it is, and the Dansville Soup wrote me, Dansville, saying, we heard that we're going to be taken over in the whole district and blah, blah, blah. And I was on a plane, I think, and I wrote, absolutely not. I don't have to check with anyone on that.
Right.
It's just, I know there's fear, and this is one of the things I think is going to be helpful in what the board did just now. Because even if it's not accepted by the legislature in its full form, which I hope it is, it'd be very helpful to us, it'll start to ease tensions that we've got a process here. We're not just willy-nilly, throwing schools in. And, I met with Middle Cities purposely, and there's anyone who wanted to come, but a representative group that could make that date, and we went through a lot of this, so, I'm glad to hear they weren't saying this was an MDE, but I can't control, as you would expect, we can't control some other folks are doing whatever they may be doing.
So can I just ask a
He may
question?
be,
He was the one.
The EAA exists under an interlocal agreement, but you're saying that local education associations could still opt into the EAA?
Under current law, any local school district can enter into an agreement with any other entity.
has nothing to do with the law.
They would have to have their own interlocal agreement, another district?
Yeah, it's almost unprecedented, but I don't know if you remember years ago, because I remember being ostracized by Romulus schools because we enforced a pupil accounting rule at that time, if I'm remembering, where they went in and opened a school in Detroit.
Yes.
And they just started enrolling kids. So we said, you can't just open a school in Detroit. There's autonomy to Detroit. And the bottom line was, if I'm remembering this correctly, was that they tried to then get a interlocal agreement with Detroit, which they theoretically could have, but Detroit's thinking, we're not making an agreement with you to open a school. But they could, in theory. I've not seen it done. But that's probably what, if, I don't want to judge this, I have no idea, but if that's what Covington's doing, he may be asking them, would they like to have an interlocal agreement with them, which would be independent of any of these laws? That's just something that's been around forever, but I don't know why anyone would.
And that would be a board decision.
That would be a board
The board would
decision.
have to vote on
Local school board would have
that.
to vote, and it would
Oh,
have to be a
yeah.
public meeting.
Right, right, absolutely.
And
I
the
mean, those
community
are.
would have a voice in
And
that.
as I said, and I remember at the time, and when I say ostracized, I mean, it was a problem for a while, because it was as if we had taken rights away from Romulus, and we're thinking, no, we're protecting the rights of an autonomous district, that you can't just go down. Remember this kind of, that they just went in and opened a building and started enrolling kids. And the way audits work is you don't see it till later. If I'm I mean, we're opening a school, and so what it meant is they had to pay back money. I'm not mistaken here, so that's what caused all hell to break loose. But I thought, he's long gone, so I don't want to, say anything about the superintendent, but I remember thinking, how is this our fault? That you opened a school there beyond your authority, and now we're taking money back for that, and somehow we did it?
Some district craves public attention.
This-
Joining the EAA would probably get.
Well, they get more than they ever bargained for.
If a local school district created an interlocal agreement with the EAA?
They could, under old laws, I mean, that have been around forever. I don't know why they would or what their motivation would be, but you could. I mean, I
thought
guess
that
the
was
same way a local.
very creative use of that old law.
To get rid of the union.
Well, I mean, some of it could be, local districts do. There are cases out there where they've chartered schools and used charter entities to run one of their schools, so maybe in that same spirit,
Well-
they might be interested.
Well, they might be interested in getting rid of the union, and firing all the teachers, hiring their buddies,
But again, that would have to be done in a public meeting by them with all the,
contracting with whoever they want.
Board.
yeah. The board would have to decide that, and it would be hard to do.
Hopefully, the board would, continue to be a public board, but I don't know. I mean, at that point, I guess there is no more public board, right?
It's the EAA board, right?
Sorry.
Well, that's weird. Anyway,
What
okay.
What's our role in this?
Oversight of public education.
I mean, but what's our role in preventing a locally controlled board from contracting with whomever they want? Like, I mean, look, personally, I get it. Professionally, I just don't think we have a role in it.
I wasn't sure what the,
As long as it's not corrupt.
Look, I get it. Personally, I'm just saying, professionally, I don't.
I've never signed into that.
Not our job at this stage. We have no role in that.
I think
but
we
we're
have
not all lawyers, and so some of us need to ask you.
Fair, and I'm trying to answer.
Some of us think we have a role. Some of us think we have a role.
I don't know if that was a water bottle or a gavel, but.
I
want to get into it because there's.
I think we should skip a meeting, because this was like 2 meetings in one.
Yeah.
Happy trails to you as we
You too, sir.
Keep smelling ginger. You have ginger to eat?
Yeah.
How many of us have signed up for the State of the
You have
State
ginger?
address?
Everybody, but